The April 15th, 2025 Auburn City Council workshop will be called to order. We have a single agenda item tonight, and that's workshop for the FY26 budget. I think perhaps to recap where we left off in the last workshop, currently where we are on the city operating expenses, we're at a 2.9% increase. On school operating expenses, a 4.9% increase. Intergovernmental, combined intergovernmental, 6.4%. County tax, 8.6%, which leaves in total a total operational or a total change of 5.27. That's all combined with debt service and operating for all accounts. We are the combined revenue increase that's outside, and as well as the new revenue items that we identified in the prior workshops. We're at 4.28% increase in revenue, leaving us at a total tax levy change of 5.63%. That assumes the $500,000 decrease in the school budget that we asked the superintendent to take back to the school board to get feedback for us. So we don't anticipate having details of the impact of that $500,000 until the Thursday night workshop. Additionally, at the Thursday night workshop, we should have some preliminary number from the assessor's office regarding a year-over-year valuation increase that can be used for budgetary purposes. We're not anticipating at this point market increases, so this would be straight valuation increase for new construction, renovations, those types of things that have taken place over the last year. And then one other item of note, I think, before we get into the council discussion, Council Platts raised a question at the last meeting about the required votes for the budget, and the city manager and I gave an explanation about the change in the state statute and the requirement for 5 votes. There was some questions about that, so we researched that, and the manager consulted with legal to get clarification, given the state statutory change, what the current requirement is, and Mr. Manager, you can, if you would, provide an update of the feedback from your consultation with legal.
Thank you, Mayor. So as the Mayor just mentioned, when looking at the state statute, so though going back to when the council had made the adjustment, which we all refer to LD1, after the state statute was passed, basically stated the same thing that our ordinance stated, is that if the CPIU increased and you were going greater than the CPIU, then you needed to make sure you had, and it varied for towns. Some towns meant that it went for a public referendum. Some communities, based on the way that the charter was set up, it would be a supermajority within the council to override that CPIU amount. And so even though we had an ordinance and we were following the ordinance was in compliance with state statute. So if you take a look at the pecking order of our language, right? So we have state statute, we have city charter, then we have city ordinance. So when the state statute was repealed last session, we can no longer operate under the ordinance because the charter supersedes an ordinance. And so the charter only requires a 4 majority vote, not a 5. So when you adopt the budget, it will only be it would only be by four votes. So we did reach out to the city attorney, Dan Stockford. He reviewed the language based on our charter, our ordinance, and state statute being repealed. That would be the process for you in this budget process, this budget deliberations. So 4 votes actually will pass this. This is separate from the language that then allows for bonding and any other language that's allowed within the charter. That's the difference, is the charter is the dictating language for us moving forward. So if the council seeks to go back to that policy ordinance, you would have to do it in a charter revision. So, so right now, so this budget will be passed by four members of the council. That would be equaling the majority. I'll make sure I make that finding from Dan Stockford available for you, so you could take a look at it. It references also, he cited a case in that review, and so you'll have that for documentation as well.
Any questions on the advice from legal? Not seeing any. After members of the council have had a few days to review the presentation the manager provided last Thursday, are there questions of the manager regarding the current budget proposal or discussion amongst the council?
I had one comment, Mr. Mayor,
Council
just
Platt.
a bookkeeping question. As I was going through my budget doc, you had given us broken down expense sheets for every department. IT is skipped over in my report. So IT is the one department that I have no detail for. I don't know if everyone's seeing that in their budget books.
In which document?
This is the Munis expense detail packet that we received maybe a month ago. I believe the account is,
Yeah, this is the master list.
yeah, master list. I think the account's 1,020, and my detail sheet just skips right over that. It may or may not be pertinent to what we talk about today, but I just noticed that was the piece of info that I had missing.
And do you know which account that is?
I believe it was 1,020, 1020, but I'll double check.
1025?
Could be 1025, yeah.
Information
On
technology.
technology. So I do see it in the master list.
And I do as well, just I don't have it in the detail.
The Munis report.
So
the Munis
so make sure you're looking at this Munis printout. Says next year, current year budget analysis.
Correct. And I believe it is supposed to exist on page 9, in between debt service and fire and EMS, in account.
So our
10,
Munis accounts
page 9.
don't always line up, so let me just pull that out now. I've got it here.
So
I'm sure they're not-
I
they're not
see
always in
that
the same order.
on page 13. I don't think they
There it
come out
is.
the
Nope.
same order
Yep,
in the
there it is.
reports.
I see it. Thank you.
Yep.
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 I appreciate that.
Yeah, Council Mill?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Manager, just to make sure I understand, this printout that you gave us tonight reflects the changes that you presented to us at the last workshop.
So
The-
except there's two changes in that sheet that you just got handed. The one that I sent you that we also posted online. The only thing that's changed within that is that I backed out TIF expense from the municipal expense. So you'll see that TIF line item, where TIF is now backed out of the municipal. And then, as we had discussed, Council Walker, for not being at the last meeting, he was actually at the Maine Waste to Energy meeting, because they were setting the tipping rate for our solid waste. That $52,000 increase for the new tipping fee is now in that amount. It's different than what was in the last meeting.
So you presented the master list adjustments in the last workshop.
Yes.
So that's reflected in here, other than those two changes you just said?
Other than those two changes. Yeah, your master list didn't change at all. Yes. I'm sorry,
these
it does. It
adjustments that
changes
we
the
got, that
solid
we
waste as
received
well.
last time.
You'll
Thank
see
you.
the solid waste on the
Yep.
master list, and then on the summary, you'll see the number change of the 52,000, but you'll also see the TIF expense in a separate line item.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the council?
Then finally, I'm sorry, the
sure.
last clarification, and that does not include the adjustments of the additional, the three adjustments, alternate funds.
Your worksheet that you were given here, this includes all the, if you looked at the notes on the side, this will make all the adjustments to any supplemental, any revenue, all of that is all worked in. Remember, you're looking off from the council proposal, not the manager's.
So just to be clear, the council change worksheet, all of those items are included in the new summary.
That's correct. Under the council column.
Other questions or comments? Council Walker?
Thank you. I see under the homeless service reduced from 275 to 250, and I know that I wasn't in here the last meeting, but that 250 is still higher than what I predicted there. So if you don't mind, I'd like to still go back to where I stood before, and I know I said 100,000. I'd be willing to ask that we do 150,000, but I'm not willing to vote on the 250.
Other question and comments? Council Cowell?
Yeah, just, excuse me. The reason for the 250 is in order to make sure that there was an adequate amount of money to cover the costs of what was covered this past year for our warming center. Understand it would be nice if we could reduce it further. My concern is if we went to 150, we may not be able to cover those costs if we had to put that in all by ourselves. So I just think it's something that we all should have further discussion about if we're going to do that.
Other questions or comments? Council Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Taking care of the homeless isn't just the city's responsibility. It takes everybody. It takes the churches, nonprofits, and everything. But with that said, the city still has an obligation to put in a little bit of money to cover the gaps. What's happening with this placeholder money, we don't know what the new expenses are going to be for this year. Out of that money, we may be having to pay city staff if we have to open up our own warming shelter in order to house not just the homeless, but even Auburn residents. We don't know if Caden's Kitchen or another organization is going to have an overnight shelter. We may have to put some sort of money, I'm not saying not 400,000, not 250,000, but we may have to put in some dollars in order for them to take our homeless or those that want to go there. I mean, I understand the fact that we have an extremely tough budget year. And if I didn't think this was necessary, I was going to support Councilor Walker's recommendation and motion, but at this point, I just can't at this time, until we get more hard numbers of what we actually need. I can't support the 150,000. I mean, we don't know what the state is going to have for money because they're in their own doo-doo. And we don't know what's going to happen with the federal government. We know things are happening in Auburn, but with these tariffs and and issues with our businesses and even our local homeowners, whether they're seniors or young families. It's too unpredictable. I mean, this budget right now, the city manager and some of the councilors have worked really hard to bring it down to where it is. In my heart, I know we've got to pull it down further, but I'm not sure what we're going to be able to cut to do that, other than services to help the most vulnerable, which is the homeless population, those that are on the cusp of becoming homeless, as well as the other pet thing of mine is food insecurity. I know there's an organization that's going to start up and try to help bridge that gap, but Auburn also has the Grab and Go program. I just want to make sure that those that can't get services elsewhere are taken care of.
Other questions or comments? Council Wise?
Thank you. Apologize for not being at the last meeting. I agree with, on Councilor Walker's side. I think that I had spoken before about reducing the 250. My big thing is a plan. Is there a plan? I hear about a warming shelter, but unless having the plan and hearing that we're taking numbers from Caden Kitchen and formulating that would be the cost, without seeing a plan of what we would know if we were to have a homeless shelter. A homeless warming area. That's kind of, for me, what I need to see, and not seeing that and not having a plan. This could be a reoccurring expense that will come up and be on for future councils potentially, so that can get formulated. We're pushing off automated recycling, and recycling is a big deal for people in Auburn, and trying to do that. And that's a huge expense that we're pushing off. And I think a lot of people want to hear about recycling and having that done. That was a big discussion, in which there's an ad hoc council, ad hoc committee that the mayor had formed. So, I think, I would more, if we're going to spend $250,000, I would like to see more of a plan. I just hear that there's something without seeing a plan. And that's very important to me before committing a bunch of money to do it. I see there was a plan for automatic recycling, which is good. I can see more of a vision for that. I'm not really on the side of approving 250, because I don't really see a plan. Just here's an idea, or thought process for it.
So perhaps to add some clarity to this, there is no plan, and the assistant city manager spoke to this before. The current contract that we just entered into with Casella does not have automated solid waste pickup in the first year. Regardless, they are not able to get the equipment to do that in the first year. If they did, they would have bid that. What's happening with the automated solid recycling waste carts is that because Casella is unable to do this in the first year, we're pushing that expense out, and that will be included in years 2 through 5 of the contract. So whether we put that in or don't put it in, it's not going to change whether automated recycling starts. We're going to have the current plan for recycling today. It's going to be every other week. It's going to be manual, and then starting in the second year, as the assistant city manager briefed us earlier, they will go to automated pickup, and the recycling will happen on a weekly basis in conjunction with the trash pickup. I appreciate Councilor Wisner's questions about the plan. So I don't think the issue regarding homelessness is whether there is a plan or not. The question is which plan will be implemented. So the current plan that regarding the shelter is the state awarded $2.5 million. Well, to back up, if you recall our prior conversations, there was discussion about an emergency shelter in the Lewiston-Auburn area. And everybody agreed that Lewiston would take the lead on that. And they went through a procurement process, and subsequent to that, the $2.5 million to stand up the shelter, capital money, was awarded by the state. That work is currently in process, and the current plan is for them to stand up an emergency shelter for next winter. As I said at the previous two meetings, it's not clear whether that will occur on that timeline or not. So where the 250 comes from is that currently the city of Lewiston is including, has in their budget, it hasn't passed yet, but from my discussion with the council president, they have included $400,000. It's true to say that we received a $400,000 request from Cadence Kitchen, but in our earlier discussion, the issue of utilization of a homeless shelter is mostly driven by population, and Councilor Cowan and Councilor Geary chaired the ad hoc committee. I think they would agree with that. So at a proportional amount, that's around $265,000 a year. If they are unable to stand up the shelter in time, then the plan would be to implement a 5-month warming center, just like happened this winter. That was $239,000 this year. They were able to reduce the per day cost of that shelter from $1,800 something when we did the 10 weeks, winter before this, down to $1,500 and something per day in this one. You take in some inflationary pressures, you're in the $245,000, $250,000 range. So I think that the point is not whether there are plans and there are things in motion, it's where it's unsure what will happen. But what we are sure of is one of those things is going to happen in this year. And to Councilor Geary's point, right now there's an understanding that there will be participation by a number of entities. To run that shelter is, and we can go through the calculations again, but that we have in prior meetings, is approximately $1.6 million per year. They are not asking for the city of Lewiston and the city of Auburn to fully fund the emergency shelter. They're asking us to contribute, and they will have to do like every other shelter in the state and seek grants and philanthropic donations from a variety of folks to close the budget gap between what the municipalities provide, which at the current level we're discussing between the two cities for a shelter to be $650,000. They're still going to have to identify $950,000 more to be able to operate the shelter. So I understand Councilor Wisner's point that we don't have an answer about which we're going to do, but I think it's fair to say it's going to be one or the other. And that's where we get to the 250. And I guess I would ask, as I asked at the prior meetings, what is it that councilors that want to reduce this to 150, what's your plan? What are you funding with that at the $150,000 level?
That was kind of be a question of mine or a comment of mine, I guess. I kind of come at this from a budgetary perspective, as I know we all are, but I'm not going to sit up here and say it's the right thing to do, because it's obviously the right thing to do. What we're here to talk about is, does it make sense financially? I look at it from a budgetary perspective. In my mind, these costs are coming to us whether or not we want to see them. Now, we can say we're not going to support this shelter, we're not going to support this warming hut, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think when the cold months hit and someone dies in Bonnie Park, I'm pretty sure we're going to authorize expenses to fund a warming shelter. I don't know how. I'll speak for myself. I could not vote against that if that came before me, in 8 months. So my point being is those costs are here. So we can either not fund it now, and we can be presented with this request down the line, and we're going to have to think about our fund balance or think about other buckets. But I just think that's fiscally irresponsible. I think it's fiscally irresponsible to not budget for something that you know is coming. This isn't like plowing. We could say we want to plow less and we're going to tell people to drive less. We could do that. I don't know that that's the smartest thing to do, but we could do that. All we can do with the homeless problem is look away. It's not going away. It's right there in front of us. You can't look away and it goes away. So I actually really appreciate Counselor Weiser's point of, there is no plan, and I acknowledge that there isn't. What we're doing is funding a bucket of money that could then be planned for the right things. My fear is that if we don't fund it, we're even further from a plan. It's like the absolute opposite of having a plan is to not even have a funded bucket of money to deal with these issues. Now, one question I have for the mayor is, I think where I draw the line to Leroy's point and the number he put out, I think there is some movement for me. I probably draw the line at $200,000 because I know that's going to be a cost for us. I also know there's probably going to be, again, requests for us to fund more. And I hate to say it, but that's coming. So my question to you, Mr. Mayor, is if we have 250, 200, 150,000 in this bucket, is the council approving expenditures out of that bucket for future needs, or does the manager have authority to expend that money since we've already approved that?
It would,
Depending on what the authorization is. And this would be generally for homeless services, but I think it's been very clear from the conversation that the manager would have two options. The money would go towards a joint emergency homeless shelter, or if that didn't come to fruition, it would be to go towards a warming center. I think that if there's some proposed use for that money other than that, the manager would come back to the council and inform the council what the situation is. But the manager can speak for himself, but I would not envision that money could be used for anything other than those two items.
that's correct. It would, obviously there's, as Councilor Weiser said, there's currently no plan in place. I think this is a moving target. But one thing that we are certain on is that the last 2 years you've allocated some money. Problem is you haven't allocated it out of your operating budget. We've said, okay, let's dip into fund balance. Let's, try to find funding another bucket. So that this, now that you're 3 years in, this is a consistent need that has been funded. And so allocating these funds is the correct thing to do so that you're not pulling out of your emergency account, because it's really not an emergency. You funded it for the last 2 years. So it does make sense for you to put this into your operating. And to Councilor Platt's point, if it's out of line with what we've done in the past, and I feel like, we need to make sure that the council has consensus on what we're doing, that's coming back before you. It's not, I won't be spending that money just on anything other than really what we're focusing on is either warming center or sheltering needs. That's what that funding is allocated for.
Look, a couple points I'd make. So we talked about this at last year's budget, right? After we spent the $63,500 out of fund balance to do the 10-week shelter at the beginning of the term of this council, last year we had a discussion about funding the warming center. And the Lewiston and the Auburn City Councils were let off the hook because Maine Housing awarded a one-time grant to the warming center in Lewiston to run it for this year, right? And then the other thing I would say is, look, I think what the manager said last Thursday night is still pertinent, which is we can put 250 in there, we can put 150 in there, we can put $10,000 in there, but it's not going to change what the number is. And as the manager said, if you cut it, okay, you can cut it, but he's going to be coming back asking for at least this amount of money, because there's no scenario coming down the road in either of these alternatives that's going to be less than that amount. It just doesn't, it just doesn't exist. I mean, we could say, okay, we're going to appropriate less, we're not going to participate in the regional shelter, and the outreach workers will put people in the emergency shelter in Lewiston from Lewiston. Then what are we going to do? So, look, we can have that discussion, but I think that I agree with the manager. This is a item that is going to continue, and I think that whichever of these alternatives ends up happening this winter, you're going to need at least this level of funding to fund it. Sorry, Council Weiser?
Thank you. Yeah, just because I was mentioned a couple times after this, you know, I understand the homeless is not issue is not going away. But the thing is about having the knowledge about a plan, and then if we know there's a plan, then why are we sitting here saying we're going to cut it? I just like to see a plan. If the real need is going to be $500,000, we need to start addressing that. I mean, we just looked, and I look up here and it says the pilot project is we suspended the EMS. I mean, from my understanding, EMS calls are going up, fire, police are going up. So, I mean, I would imagine that the EMS, we have our EMS that are going to calls at homeless camps, and these citizens need these services. So, if you know, I talked about cutting back. I just like to see a plan that helps me have a better thing. But in respect to this, then maybe we should have the consideration of not eliminating EMS services, because that will help service those that need the greatest need of help, because it's not just going to help those that are in the homeless community. They're going to help our citizens that are having heart attacks that might have better response times. If you have 5 citizens that are having heart attacks within our community, we have the EMS services to help respond to these individuals and give the greatest care. You know, maybe that's the conversation we need to have, and hearing these plans, that's what I'm looking for, is, to have these conversations about a plan and say, okay, then maybe the 250 is fine with me, okay, but it's just a plan. That's all I'm asking for. So I
Councilman
appreciate it.
And I made that comment last week as well. I agree with Councilor Wisner on that I feel like the Auburn taxpayer, and again, I'll be the bad guy, has contributed a tremendous amount to this issue. And I'm glad to hear that Maine Housing last year, and I think that's Maine State Housing, should be the ones that are contributing to a housing. If we need to house homeless people, Maine State Housing should be the one that should be contributing to that. That should be. And the Auburn taxpayer has contributed to the homeless issue and put a lot of money in both resources and buildings, and they've made very large commitment to addressing this problem. And I think it's a very complex problem, and homeless has a very wide spectrum of people that fall into that. And as the superintendent and Mr. Neer were here talking about how we have homeless children in our school. As I was thinking about this issue, I would rather take that money or some of that and allocate some to the EMS and to the school to help the kids. Those kids, that's a different. We call everybody the same, where a homeless kid's not the same as someone that's 40 years old that's suffering from mental illness and addiction, and it's a different situation that should be treated differently. Or, the single mom that's lost her job and is out, that's a different situation. And by calling it all the same, I think it does a disservice to the people in different needs. So I agree with Councilor Wisner that I think some of this money, but one, we've already addressed a huge amount to address this problem, and the Auburn taxpayers, which I'm responsible. I'm speaking for the Auburn taxpayers. They've contributed a lot already. The county's already said they're not doing it. So now we're gonna get, communities that support regional, but it's Auburn, and it's Lewiston, and the county's not contributing. And there's no plan. And so I agree with Counselor Wisner, and I have a problem with, in this budget, taking this money and allocating it to that. I understand that it's gonna be a problem coming up. I do understand that. But we've got time, and people should be out fundraising. It's, as Counselor Gary mentioned, it's all hands on deck. Well, there should be, this group that's doing this should be fundraising. They should be raising money out in the community and getting private donations for this as well. I don't know what they're doing on that. So that's my 2 cents. That's why I have a problem with this number.
Counselor Cowan?
I think there is a plan. It's one of two options. That's what we've talked about. I'd also like just to, we can keep going back and forth if there's not a definitive plan or there is a plan. I don't think we've ever asked the Public Works to give us the specific plans of how they're going to plow the roads. We know they're going to plow the roads. There's a plan that we're going to have a need to either contribute to a shelter that's going to help a certain number of people, or we're going to help a certain number of people with a warming center. And there's benefits here too. I hear you, Councilor Wisner and Milks. It would be great if we could fund more money for EMS. Keep in mind, if we're taking people and we're getting them off the streets and putting them in a shelter, there's a lot of benefits to that. And it's proven, science around this. If people are getting they're, number one, they're safer, they're not freezing to death. Number two, they're not ending up in the ER. There may be, for the warming center, fewer EMS calls and fewer police calls. I know that the manager mentioned with the potential shelter, which is the Housing First shelter, there could be a dramatic decrease in police. That's a different scenario, so I don't know if it all is, but we are addressing, that's part of the needs. As you correctly pointed out, EMS and police are called out to these areas all the time. If they're getting into a shelter night after night after night, there's the potential they're making relationships and touches with people that can connect them to services. There's a HUD coordinator for this county that helps keep track of people and coordinate the connections to services that each individual person needs. It's easier to get that to them if they're seen on a regular basis than if they're out in some campsite and you don't know which one. So there are other benefits beyond just this dollars. It's just hard to quantify what savings we might be having once, how fast we can get someone stabilized versus how much money are we saving on police calls, where those police officers' time and resources can be diverted to other services that we'd like them to do. Same with the EMS. But there is a plan. The idea is that we're trying to make sure we're protecting people and they're not having to stay out in harsh winters. And we've had people die. So this is the reality we're talking about. If we want to talk about doing less, then we have to shorten what that is. But again, it's here, and it's involving a lot of our other public services already. In terms of the amount of people fundraising, I think let's look to the drop-in center. I don't know how much money they've made in the last year, but I believe it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that their people are bringing in. So there are ways. We could do more, absolutely can do more, and I fully support that. But I don't think that negates the responsibility of our city when we know it's having an impact and putting tremendous strain on our public safety resources. And it's costing us, we have a line item in here for $35,000 to clean up campsites. That's just putting a Band-Aid on the issue instead of actually trying to put resources in front of people because you're getting them connected and you're keeping them safe. So,
Other questions or comments? Council Eisner?
Yes, thank you. If I had a number, that's great. $250, $250,000. But if maybe that's fine. But if the city manager comes back to me and say we're going to need more money, because as I'm hearing this, there's other people we were working with to have this work. So okay, 250 is not it. Should we be up to 300? Should we be raising it? The last council meeting, I missed it. I was up in Prince Edward Island, came back, but I was fine with 35,000 for home, the cleanup sites, but somehow that got reduced to 25 now. Why are we taking away the EMS if that's going to be a service to the citizens and to the people? We should be talking about putting that back. I've heard from some they're willing to pay more taxes if they're going to get more services out of it. So why are we going to eliminate EMS and taking away from the campsites? And we talked about ways about the bulky waste, and I come back after missing one meeting, and now we cut $50,000 from bulky waste from people that want to drop off their stuff. I mean, let's have this discussion. If we got to put more under homeless services, then let's do it. I'd like to know what's going on with the contributing partners. I know we only have so much time, but if it's working with these, do we need to add more? Can we, is there going to be enough time? Because is the manager going to come back to us more? Is 250 and say, hey, we're going to need another $300,000? Do we need to start allocating that more money for that? But I would like to see these other areas. I know homelessness services is one that everybody wants to talk to. I get it. Somebody dying on the side of the street, it's horrible. That's a horrible thing. And, those are things we need to talk about. I agree. I'm just trying to figure out, is that the proper number that needs to happen, and what's the things that we're gonna have to allocate? Because I would hate to us to agree to something, and then all of a sudden we have to come back and say, we need to allocate $500,000 more. If it's gonna cost $750,000, then that's what it is. So I would just like to, know more and have a better understanding, so that when I make my vote, I have the necessary stuff. And it's a different subject because we're in homelessness, but I would like to see about the EMS, as I said, the campsite and the bulky waste kind of bring back later in. But I understand this is a homeless discussion.
Yeah, so we can certainly have a discussion about those three items and adding those back into the budget. Just a few things. So a plan for the shelter was provided to you. It's in your budget book. The mayor the manager got the request from Caden's Kitchen, and it explained the budget around their shelter. And they requested $400,000 from the three entities. Unfortunately, as we've talked about before, Council Milks is right. There is no money in the county budget this year because the request to the county arrived on the day in which the second reading of the county budget was taking place. So it was too late for them to add anything in. The request was for $400,000. We dropped it to $275,000 based on this idea of providing a proportional contribution to the shelter with what Lewiston's doing. Instead of $400,000, if you look at this proportionally, that's how we got that number down. Regarding the PS services, I'm sure we could get more information for Thursday, but I'll remind the council the discussion when we were discussing housing first and providing 30 beds, and what the manager said was that would decrease by hundreds of calls, public safety calls per year. So I understand Council Wisner's point that maybe we should have more EMS services, but it doesn't seem to me that not putting money into homeless services so we can have more EMS calls and pay for those doesn't seem like a prudent approach. To the issue of state funding.
But I just want to clarify, because it seems like from what you're saying, I just want to, just to make it clear for the record, I'm just looking for numbers of a plan and stuff like that. I'm just looking at how much is it going to cost in the future is what I'm looking for. If 250 is the number, 250 is the number, okay?
Right.
So I don't, it's on the record that if that's what it is, but I would like to see EMS come on there to do that, so.
We can talk about EMS and bulky waste and stuff once we conclude our thoughts here on homeless services. Again, the number for the shelter is estimated at 41 beds at $1.6 million a year in operating cost. So the idea that people should be raising money, that's baked into this, because what's on the table from Lewiston and Auburn right now is $650,000 out of $1.6 million. They're going to have to go out, like every other shelter in the state, and get third-party grants and get philanthropic donations in order to close that gap to operate. So within their plan already, that's what is presumed. And again, the $250, it would be our contribution to the shelter, or if that doesn't happen, to run the warming center. Two other quick points. The state is providing substantial contribution. You'll recall there's been discussion several times over the last year that the state should do more to address this situation in the Lewiston-Auburn area. So there's been lots of consultations going on with the state, and so where are we? They've provided $2.5 million to capitalize the shelter. We should know within the next week to 10 days, probably within a week now, about Housing First. And as I said in the past, I'm optimistic that either the Lewiston or Auburn proposal will be funded. That's millions of dollars, $6, $8, $9 million to build the building, and $1.5 million to $2 million a year that the state would provide for the staff. There is no taxpayer money in that solution other than we're providing the vacant lot to build that on. They're also out to RFP to provide a crisis response center for the Lewiston-Auburn area based on the pilot that occurred in Portland over the last year, which will provide 24-hour-a-day walk-in mental health and substance abuse issues, and will be very beneficial to our police department and Project Support You, because it will give them a location other than the emergency room to take these folks to, where they'll be staffed 24 hours a day with, they'll have a pharmacy there, so they're able to get people back on their medications. That's state funded. That's several $1 million a year. So I don't think it's fair to say that the state hasn't recognized that they have to be a substantial player in this and provide money. And for the Auburn taxpayers, what we've provided so far during the term of this council is $63,500 for the warming center and the building at Mill Street, right? And that's it. Nothing else that's going on in Mill Street. There's no taxpayer dollars in that. The drop-in center, as Councilor Cowan pointed out, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to run that, and they run that themselves. And the money to do the renovations is all coming from federal sources. There's no property tax funds in that. So, Councilor Cowan, did you have a comment? Councilor Mill? Yeah.
Finally, and I got it, I hear you. Finally, I just want to address, it's because both you and Councilor Cowan has said to me, you know, police, public works, fire, those are all departments of the city. This is auxiliary money. This is not something that we or the Auburn taxpayers are responsible to fund. So when you say, well, Public Works, we agree to plow the roads, and you know, why don't you fundraise for the police department, like you said, you know, to me on Thursday? That we are obligated as councilors to the taxpayers to provide these services, and this is auxiliary money, and so that's the difference, and that's why I think it's. And I do think that the taxpayers in Auburn have contributed a lot more to that Mill Street than you give them credit for, but that's for a different conversation. But I want to make sure that we're very clear on that's why it's auxiliary money.
So I guess a follow-up question I would have to that, are you suggesting that we create a department within, or an office within Business and Community Development to run homeless services? Because I see this as advantageous to the city. Instead of the city taking on primary responsibility for this, other entities are taking on the primary responsibility, and we're supporting them.
I understand that's how you see it, and what I'm simply doing is saying that this is not a chartered responsibility of city council or the taxpayers of Auburn, this particular item.
I accept that explanation as well. I think that's a fair distinction to make. But I would further say that, you know, and I'll speak briefly just so I can state my opinion and we can move on. But I won't support a budget that doesn't fund I won't support a budget that funds less than $200,000 for this item. I agree with Councilor Milks. This is auxiliary to some of the other items that we deal with, but it's still an issue. And fundamentally, it comes down to the same question to me. Well, I've already stated my opinion on budgetarily and fiscally. I think it's irresponsible not to put some money towards this because we're going to have to pay. But furthermore, if we do nothing, it's worse for the city. I'll just leave it at that. If we do nothing, I believe this city is worse off.
Council Walker?
Mr. Mayor, can we move to some kind of a vote on wherever we want to fall so we can get going here? We'll be on this until 9 o'clock the way we're going.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're not at a point to take formal votes on this as we've been elsewhere, but I'm happy to see what the consensus of the council is relative to, there's 3 thoughts on the table right now. There's $250,000 that's in here now. There's the $200,000 floor, I guess I'll call it, for that Councilor Platts has identified, and $150,000 that Councilor Walker has identified. So we're happy to see what the sentiment of the council is. We start with Councilor Platts, and people can say which of those they prefer, and then we can move on to some of the other issues.
Yeah, I wouldn't go below 200. Yeah, that's where I stand.
I'll vote in favor of the 200.
Like I said, if there's 2 different options that we're waiting on and we don't have a number, I'll go with 200, but I think we're probably going to need more if there's 2 different options out there that are going to be coming back to us and we're just waiting on how much it's going to be. I just have a feeling we're going to put more money. We're going to have to come back and allocate more money if those 2 situations that you're telling me are going to come back to us. I'll at least go 200 for that, but I have a feeling we're probably going to get another request for money.
Councilor Milk?
Yeah, I can't support, I would be in favor of cutting that in half and funding with the other half the EMS.
Councilor Khan?
I'd like to hold it at 250 for now. Maybe we'll have some more information in a week.
I wouldn't go below 200. Since I retired from Auburn Housing Authority, I think homelessness has probably tripled or quadrupled. I hear constant complaints from residents. What is the city doing about the homeless population? They're concerned about it. I get calls from people because they've got homeless people camped out in their backyards. It's an undue burden on police and fire. I don't consider it auxiliary. I consider it essential. I think we have to confront this issue. We've been spending years. I remember sitting on committees for 20 years with Lewiston and Auburn batting like a tennis ball back and forth across the river about who's going to deal with the homeless. Well, guess what? We're all dealing with it now because we didn't deal with it before. So I would say, I'm with Council Cowan. I'd prefer 250, but I could see a floor of 200, but I would not go below that.
Councilor Gary?
I support the 200,000 with whatever plans for expenditures of the money to come back to us with the details.
All right, so given that, I think, Mr. Manager, we'll, for the purpose of the discussion here, we'll, right now, the way this model works, it decreases it, so we'll decrease down to the 200,000 level, okay? So if I do that, So if I do that, here's where we end up. On the city OpEx, we would be at 2.7%, and your tax levy change would be 5.49%. Everything else staying equal, just making that change to drop that. And do you get that same number, Mr. Manager? Yeah, 2.7, and then bottom line, 5.49? Yeah, okay. So perhaps, Council Weisner, do you want to go on to some of these other items that you had questions about as you weren't able to be here last time?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. Yeah, I would like to see, I mean, I thought we all had talked about, I guess things changed since I left. I wasn't here, about making campsites, the cleanup go back up to 35, because dealing with waste, the issue of cleaning up campsites, having that money so Public Works or whoever can take care of that. Funding EMS, the original request was what, 135, 500. So I would say at least, maybe the chief can come and talk to it more and see, give me some information since it's been a little bit. What would 75, half of that number be? What assistance that could be to us for hours or staffing wise to do that.
So if I can just clarify that one before you go on, right? So just so we all recall, this one's a little complicated. So we did the pilot last year. So in the manager's proposal, because it was current services, there was $40,000 in there. So in order to extend for the full year, the amount of additional peak service that the chief had done in the pilot, we would have an additional $135,000. And if we did that, extended that period for the year, it would generate $75,000 in revenue. So we can, I don't recall, but the chief's here, he can explain to us, to remind us, on that peak service hours, what those hours for service was that we were doing on overtime, and what the benefit might be if it's less, and then we could talk, because we'd have to redo the numbers and adjust the 40, the 135, and the 75, depending upon the hours of service that the council wants to do. So, Chief,
Yeah,
do you want to comment?
I'll let the
on
chief talk about the revenue piece, but using those numbers that you just threw out, so that means what we would be doing is we'd putting 100,000 back into the budget, because we'd bring in the 40,000 from that we had originally, that we backed out, the 135, actually it's 135.5, and then we'd back out the 75, but you just talked about the
Right.
revenue.
As the mayor articulated, I think you had to push the button, chief.
Thank you. As the mayor articulated, in the current budget year, we had funded the pilot program to bring on a third ambulance during peak service hours. Through call volume analysis and then workload analysis, because the workload on our EMS staff is inclusive of more than just the emergency responses. We identified that the best hours to do that staffing we're currently staffing about 40 hours a week, Tuesday through Friday, 10 hours a day, 4 days a week. Peak volume, but that's also when a lot of additional work happens at the station. We're struggling with the increased call volumes that we've seen with compliance issues, training issues, equipment check issues, because we're just running so many calls during peak hours. So it was to capture those calls, meet better demand for service, and allow us to remain compliant with training and other things that we're doing. That pilot started at the beginning of March. We're in the process of collecting that 3 months worth of data that were funded for this year. The request that you saw before you was enough to continue that for a 12-month period, allow us to collect more data, but the offsetting revenue was an estimation on my part, because during those peak hours when both of our ambulances are committed is when we're often giving more of our revenue stream potential calls to mutual aid agencies that come in during those hours. So it was an estimate of me just trying to get a count that, hey, weekdays in those 10 hours a day, 4 days a week, how many mutual aid calls are we getting, and that's lost revenue to us. So we would be able to recoup that revenue to offset some of those costs. Now, structurally, that whole cost structure is really based on us doing that at the overtime rate for the 2 people that staff that right now. But that gives us the ability to hedge into this program, understand the data behind it before we make more permanent moves to try to do it another way, whether that's cost effective to do it through other positions or whatever. But we're not out on that limb now by having to do that, by structuring it this way. Does that answer your questions at this point? Any follow-ups?
So if we did the 135.5, then you're expecting rough calculations of 70,000 worth of income. So we're looking at that would probably be a $70,000 expense. Just rough numbers,
Well, I think
if I understand that correctly.
175.5.
It'd be
175.5. What was being added in was the 135.5 to continue it beyond the 3 months that was already in the manager's budget that was then backed out. So 175.5, 75,000 taken out, that means your offset would be 100,500.
So just so you'll have the numbers, if we did that, we would be back to, right, it would increase the OPEX, city operational cost to 2.9%, and it would bring us up our total tax levy to 5.63 if we add this back in. And the council may decide to, but just so everybody's clear about what the numbers would be if we decide to add this in.
It says 5.63 now.
Well, right, but we just reduced, and now we're adding back in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Council Collins.
Chief, I had a follow-up question for you. In last week's, in the adjustments, you had, there were 2 cuts that you had suggested, or the manager had said.
He did not suggest this.
Okay. I apologize. So what was recommended in the adjustments was removing the 40,000 and removing the pilot altogether. But also there was a $50,000 reduction because of a plan to take some equipment offline. I guess my question to you is if we felt it was important to put money back into the budget, I would want to know your thoughts on which one should be funded. Which one's more important if there's one you would fund first or second?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would absolutely say that maintaining the level of service that we provide now would absolutely take precedent over trying to augment that and build EMS service during peak hours. To do the other suggestion and potentially take an apparatus out of service would drop us below response levels that the department hasn't seen in 3 decades in the face of increased call volume that we've seen exponentially. So certainly if I was prioritizing that, I would say that retaining the staffing levels that we've had as a period of time, meaning we maintain a fire response apparatus in all 3 districts, that we have 2 EMS units on 24/7, maintaining that would be, if you will, the sacred cow that I think we have to hold on to, because reduction in that would be a significant reduction in the safety of service.
Great, thank you. And if I may, a follow-up question to that. If we weren't able to, if we funded that, and then we thought we could put some additional into, but not the 175.5, would there still be benefit for you if a smaller portion or any portion of that additional for the pilot were to be done? Could you find times and make that worthwhile?
We would try to continue that program with whatever funding, the 3rd ambulance, we would try to continue that without whatever level of funding that you could find appropriate, and collect the data to come back to you with a future request to say, here are the benefits that happened with the limited resources you were able to give us.
So is there a point of diminishing return, right? It's 40 hours a week now. If just an illustrative example here, if the council said, well, 10 hours a week, is it worth doing at that?
I think it's worth.
Maybe it's only worth doing if it's 20 hours a week or something.
I don't think so. I think that there's a lot of both tangible and intangible benefits to it as a program. And what I mean by that is, even at 10 hours a week, we would then try to prioritize the highest peak call volume for those 10 hours, and we would be sure that we can optimize the training and the compliance checks and all of those things that we do during that time frame. We may, and I would love the flexibility to be able to analyze it, and I'll give you an example. Rather than 10 hours a week for 52 weeks, we might say, hey, the summer is a busier time for us, so maybe we do 20 hours a week for 26 weeks. I would love that flexibility to do that, but we also want to provide some level of consistency so the public knows what to expect. So I would do a balancing game and try to understand the best benefit we could get for public safety with whatever resource we were able to allot.
Right, so Mr. Manager, would you agree that if the council puts money back into this, it's within the flexibility of the manager and the fire chief to determine, it's a bucket of hours, right? As the chief's pointing out, we're talking about 40, but it's really 40 times 52. And however, within that funding stream, however, from an operational perspective, you would decide is most efficient and you get the most benefit from, you could set that up within the funding stream in the way you think works best.
Yeah, I think if the intent is to take the 50,000 that was there for the taking the apparatus out of service, reduce that. Obviously, revenue would need to be considered in that as well. But I think that, or just leave it as the net, and then he just needs to adjust that even further. But I think that the chief would know when the team has greater vacation time use, that what's available for backfilling. There might be weeks where it makes more sense probably not to apply the third ambulance because this team's already stretched. Some of that might be that, we had some periods this past year where it was back to back fires. Well, that might not be the best time for him to implement the third ambulance, only because, what you're hoping to accomplish with reducing stress on the team that's providing the EMS services, you're adding, he may not have availability of people saying, yeah, I'll sign up for that because they've already been brought in a lot that week for other overtime. So I think you're right, Mayor. The chief would make those adjustments as necessary, and at the end of the day, rather than the 52 weeks, it might end up being somewhere around 38 weeks.
So, Council Mills.
Yeah, so if what we're saying, if I understand, you propose reducing fire by 90,000 on our proposed change?
Put that back in.
If we put that back in, but not the other thing?
Adjust the amount for the EMS
Down.
Just so we're clear, the 90 is the 50 related to taking a piece of apparatus offline on the weekends, and the 40 is the 40 for the ambulance. So I think you're on the right track, Councilman, but I would think of it this way. I think if the sentiment of the council is that we should not have the $50,000 reduction, so we're not taking an apparatus offline, we should make that. And then, and if that's the sense of the council, we can tell you what the numbers are, and then we can address, do you want to add the third ambulance for the proposed 40 hours a week? Do you want to do something less? So, Councilman.
Because we already have the ambulance.
Yeah, we have the
The
physical
ambulance is sitting there.
Correct.
The physical equipment?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Right, so it's staffing.
Correct.
It's the staffing of the third ambulance
Right.
that we're talking about.
Yes, exactly.
I just make sure that if, I was 95% sure that was the case, but I'm sure there's people watching that, we already have the ambulance, so it's taking staffing to utilize that ambulance. So what you're saying, Chief, is that if we allocated back this 90,000, you've got enough to continue on with your pilot project for a period of time?
If you were to allocate the 90,000, and Mr. Manager, please correct me if I'm wrong, that would ensure that we wouldn't have to do a brownout situation with other fire apparatus and engines around the city. And it would give me a limited amount of funds to try to distribute a limited number of hours throughout the year to staff a third ambulance on a very narrow basis.
That's only so that means you're using the same 40,000 that you allocated last year. The question is, do you want to take part of that 135.5
Right.
and extend that beyond just 3 months worth of coverage that's currently available?
So if we authorized to 200 on the previous issue, and we took 50 of that and allocated that towards the third ambulance project? Would that be something that,
Well-
that's another 50 grand to that?
Well-
Because that's addressing a lot of the same population, similar
You
population.
restore last year's funding, plus you restore
I-
the 135.5, plus the 75,000 revenue offset. The operating, so take the revenue out, so just the operating is going to be 3.32% with that increase, or just
So
the municipal.
I'm not sure that that was Counselor Milk's point. I think Counselor Milk's point was, if we take $50,000 out of the homeless money and transfer it to this purpose, and I think what I would say is, we're gonna be here a really long time with that approach. I think the sentiment of the council was the 200, it's in there. I think we should deal with these individual items. We'll see where we get, and if councilors say, well, that's too much, then we could entertain that. But just to be clear, I think the best way for the council to think of this is two completely separate issues. And I guess I would ask this question so we can move this along. What's the sentiment of the council relative to restoring the $50,000 so that we are not dropping a piece of apparatus on weekends at times? Is the sentiment to
I
include
support,
that?
yeah, I support that. I'm not as supportive of the continuation of the pilot program. I am, but I agree with the chief's comments. If you've got to choose, it's about the apparatus on the weekends as opposed, I mean, maybe if we're in a better situation in 18 months, let's bring the pilot program back, or, whatever. But I'm very much in support of on Thursday, if we talk about this again. I like the idea, and I get Steve's point. He's saying it's a wash, but it's a wash if you take 50 out of homeless and add it to here, but I think for this purpose, every decision should be individual. And for this one, I do support adding 50 back.
Yeah, Counselor Walker.
I support having the third one with whatever time the chief feels that is the right amount to put there, so we would know that number up front. But I don't want to brown out.
What about the 50,000 for the apparatus reduction?
No, I don't want a fire truck or anything else taken out of service.
So you're in favor of putting that 50,000 back in? Yeah, okay. Counsel White?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm in favor of putting that 50,000 back for the apparatus, and I'm in favor of continuing the pilot program because, as the chief said, there's a lot of calls. It's a service. It's going to help people in need, which is drastically needed, especially when they're dealing with so much, and giving the tools that our fire department needs to address the city's needs.
Counsel Mill?
I agree with that.
Okay. Counsel Cowan?
I agree with the 50,000 to bring the apparatus, no brownouts. Again, I think I'm more in align with Councilor Platts. I think the pilot program is a very valuable program, but if we're talking about dollars and already an increase on the taxpayer dollars, I think I'd choose to hold off on that for now.
Counsel White?
Thank you. I'd put the 50,000 in, and I would hold off on the EMS pending what we determine on the fund balance. I agree with the manager. We don't want to dip greatly into fund balance, but if we keep it on the upper range, like 13 or 13.5%, and there's room to do more stuff, particularly the EMS, I'd be all in favor of that, but we don't know this number yet. We also don't know the assessed value yet. Those are things I hope we'll see soon, but
All right. Counsel Gary?
I support making our citizens safer with the tools that the fire department needs, but also I want to see more on the funding and stuff, because we've been after the city manager to cut to bring this this budget increase lower, and we're seemingly adding more stuff back.
Okay, so I think the consensus at the moment here is to put the 50,000 back in. So that leaves us, if we make that change, our OpEx, city OpEx is 2.8% increase, and the overall tax levy is 5.58. This is, of course, cumulative, right, from the things we just talked about before this. I'm not really clear about the ambulance, so I think, Mr. Manager, we can get together, because there's a bunch of moving parts when you try to put that back in this model. And for Thursday, we can provide the council with what it would look like. You know, we can model out some scenarios. What it would look like if we put the 40 in, what it would look like if we put 20 hours a week in, so the council will have a better sense of what the impact is. Councilor Milton?
One, I think Counselor Whiting had a good thought with the fund balance piece, because we also haven't had the reval. And so, while I agree that we should not be offsetting any budgetary items with fund balance, I think a one-off, where maybe the chief could come back at the end of 12 months and say, hey, I can cut overtime by X dollars, and then we could make a budgetary. I think that's the point, is there an efficiency that we can get from that? So I would be in favor of looking at that as an item when we're on the other end.
Yeah, okay, so we'll take that into account for Thursday night, what those models would look like, what that would mean for the fund balance. Just to make sure everybody's on the same page, right? In the manager's proposal is already 1.8 million from the fund balance, because that's what the council authorized last year, and that amount was rolled over. And you're going to get someplace in the area of 150,000 or so additional for your emergency reserve, because your emergency reserve is required to be 0.5% of your budget. What's in here now is 550, because that was last year. Of course, we won't know the real number until the council votes on the budget. So you're going to be already coming out of, that's what the fund balance numbers look like. And then for Thursday night, to Councilor Milks's point, if we look at this as a project, and not as a budgetary item, as we're extending the life of the pilot project to gather additional information. So I think the manager's made a note of this, and we can have some further discussions about that Thursday night. I go back, Council Wisner. I don't know if we got through your whole list. We got talking about that one. Do you want to go on?
Yeah, yes, please, thank you. I appreciate everybody in the discussion and this to help out, because there is, adding some of this stuff in, I know, but it's, there's some good conversations and services that people depend on by having these discussions. The next thing was the campsite cleanup, going from 35 to 25 and just restoring that back to where the...
So, yeah, if I can cover that. So what we had budgeted originally was basically where the average of where we thought we were for the year. I think that we have a decent plan in place. The campsites that are already cropping up, we've already had the team go out and visit. We have a much better response process policy in place. I think the goal is that as these people are reporting them, then better than we probably had in the past. So the thought of reducing the 10 is that we have a good system in place. I think our team will be out, will be responsive to it. I feel safe with cutting it, the 10,000. I think that we will still have, we'll have a good team that's out, hopefully not allowing these sites get too out of control with a lot of costs. And so, so that's the thought on that process, is that I think we could probably reduce that amount. Is my recommendation.
Yeah, Council Whiting?
I'd like to second what the manager stated about that, and I do think that the drop-in centers being very effective in connecting homeless people to services. And so maybe some of these encampments, maybe I'm being unduly optimistic, but I think that the level, the size of encampments may drop a little bit, because some of the people are getting housed or getting services and are less likely to be subjected to that. So
Yeah, I think we probably had 3 campsite reports in the last 2 weeks where the team has got out. That's our PSY folks, our homeless folks going out, making those connections right away, addressing it. It does not take long for these sites to become massive and requiring a great deal of services. So it's, now that we have it, our team will be regularly checking some of the, I think, frequent spots is probably the best way to word it, to make sure that they are at least eyes on it, reporting it. And I think I mentioned these costs are for, we contract out the service for these cleanups because of the biohazards.
Council Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does this funding of the cleanup of the encampments, as well as the concerns of our constituent that came in this last council meeting that was talking about the parks and the river walk and stuff that's covered with needles and trash and stuff that's been left by the homeless?
When our team is out on a regular schedule for park cleanup, to be clear, they're going out with a 5-gallon pail collecting needles. They're constantly picking up needles. But right now you've had, our team is not out there doing that currently. We need to do it. Weather has shifted. We need to do it. Our priority right now, as we are working through items, we need to come in compliance with our street sweeping. We need our teams to go out. Usually our contracted services starts May 1st. And so that's when you'll see a lot more presence in the parks, cleaning those up and making sure they're taken care of. We're within weeks of that taking place. But is it as a result of campsites? No. Is it a result of what we've been discussing regarding a presence of additional homeless impacts? Yeah, absolutely.
And will we fund putting out drop box containers that are tamper-proof so people can just put their spent stuff in, as well as putting out more trash receptacles?
We'll take a look at what we need to put out regarding, I think you're talking about some of the dog waste cleanup pieces that we have, that also are waste can receptacles. So those will be coming back out. Some of our challenges, leaving some of those, they're in the river throughout the year if we're not having regular presence out there. So PW pulls some of those. We don't necessarily leave those out year round unless it's an area that we're regularly plowing for walkability. We just don't do that. But yes, we'll make sure there's areas where we have, they know the areas where they see a lot of needles. And we'll do that. I think the challenge is that they're not always used. And so that's why our team is hitting those and making sure those are cleaned at least once a week, if not more.
I know there's a few homeless that have been frequent the park over by Little Theater, as well as Bonnie Park, sleeping because of the safety of being more visible. Those are some of the areas I was also thinking that it needs to be gone through to make sure that when kids or anybody wants to go and enjoy the outdoors there, that they're not going to step or get hold of a needle.
Okay, any other questions on this item? Council Weiner? Did you have more on your list?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, one last one is the bulky waste. That's the last item.
So you'll currently run bulky waste right up until June 30th. Councilor Walker and I think, had a conversation relating to this as well. So now the question is, do you want to fund this after that period? Thing is, we could communicate. A lot of times our bulky waste is just done in May, right? When we did it every other year, it was in May, one-time hit. So you are providing that. We can make sure we put out some social media posts that, look, your bulky waste opportunity will be over July 1st. That allows for this spring cleanup to take place. And then you can decide how you would like to do that moving forward. So that's the thought of removing it. We'll communicate to the public. I think Councilor Walker had said, let's make sure we're communicating that so people know you still have that opportunity this spring. It's available. go to Maine Waste to Energy and do that. However, after July 1st, all the way to June 30th, that will not be available. Then you can decide in the next budget if you want to start it for July.
Councilman Mills?
With regards to the bulky waste, what was the response and do we feel like that project was successful in removing it off? I know there was people
Yeah.
weren't happy about it, but.
Yeah, I mean, we believe it was about $145,000 that was the expense. It's uncertain. We could not track that. The current system doesn't allow us to track it, whether or not that was all Auburn residents or others doing that, or contractors going in and using it. So that's why when we had discussed before, I think Councilor Walker was talking about, let's make sure people come in, get a sticker, make that available. We also discussed paying for that. Those are things that we could work through, come up with a plan in this next fiscal year so that you could roll that out July 1st with, here's the stickers, here's the process, this is what you can do. We can talk about that after the budget, but get a good plan in place. But people will still be able to take care of the spring cleanup this year.
And just to clarify, this isn't eliminating all bulky waste because yard-type waste, brush and that type of stuff can still be taken free of charge to Old Castle, correct?
That's correct.
Right, so you can take those same things today and drop them off. If you don't do this, you have to pay for it, but you can just go on 122 and dump all that stuff for free at no charge. This is, what we're really focusing on is, the couches and recliners and stuff like that people might have at their house. Council Whiting?
That was my point about the brush, because I was thinking we were still doing that, so that's a good thing.
Council Walker?
Yes, when I talked with the manager there, everybody should pretty well have their bulky stuff already taken care of, because it's been an ongoing year, or pretty close. When it comes July 1st, it's been a whole year that we've done this. And in the past, we used to do it like every other year. So this is probably the best chance that we could have to pause and put together something even better for when we're ready to start up.
Council Collins?
Just to say, I support that. I think it makes sense to pause and do some planning. And to your point, it's great that people have a few more months to catch up if they have anything left.
So what I'm hearing, the consensus of the council is not to return the funding that's in there for this fiscal year, and during the course of the year, the city administration will do some planning and come back with a proposal, a range of proposals for consideration for the next year. Is that what, okay. And did you have any other items, Council White?
Nope, that was it. Like I said, I missed the last meeting, and so it was just cut when I come back. So I just wanted to make sure, because I like the sticker idea, and go from there. And thank you.
Okay. Other items in the current proposal for discussion, the councilors have for discussion.
I have directors that are here that could speak to any of the other items that were proposed. So if you need more detail on some of that, they're here.
Yeah, I had some additional cuts that I wanted to at least discuss. I'm not necessarily hell-bent on them, but I'd like to at least ask the questions of what effects they might have. What would you like me to just bring one up?
Could you
and
group
say-
them by departments?
I
And
did,
then I can bring
yeah.
up the departments?
I
That'd be great.
did. First one's not here. It's city clerk.
Oh, I can address that.
Okay,
That's
I
fine.
just had a question. I had, 15,000 on that budget, and my question is, has Auburn ever considered changing the hours of our clerk's office downstairs? Public access.
So
I know
what
that other
we-
cities have done that.
Yeah, so what we've done currently, if you were to go down into the clerk's office now, what we've done is we've actually merged the tax clerks and the city clerks. So that's a one-stop shop for customers. They come up, they all pull a ticket, they now can go to any one of the windows. They're all cross-trained now to be able to handle any service you come in for a tax office, whether you're registering a car, boat, dog, or you're registering to vote. That's all done now with the team that's up there. Part of that was because there are seasonal peaks for the tax office, obviously around those 2 times of year where we collect revenue, and then also some seasonal regarding boat registrations, seasonal regarding dog registrations, but then also there's a heavy lift for the clerk's office, whether that's petitions that are out or if it's people registering to vote. So the team kind of worked to collaborate and bring those individuals together. So to reduce that time, it's not really a full time. So brings challenges because you don't have just some hours broken out to be able to make that happen.
Salaried folks are working down
That's
there,
correct.
whether the door is unlocked or locked.
That's correct.
Yeah, that makes
Yes.
And perhaps related, so the council's probably seen in the press here over the last year, several of the larger cities have changed their work week, right? So they're closed on Fridays, they're open 4 days a week. And I've talked to the mayors in those cities, and it won't be any surprise to the council that the employees think this is a really great thing. And every city has had significant complaints and pushback from their residents because the hours in which City Hall is open has been decreased, and that has caused some problems for folks. So I think if we're going to decrease the hours, to me, it's not just a financial issue, it's service availability issue for residents. That we want to think through that if we decide we want to trim that back.
Yeah, because we have peak times throughout the day, but we have peak times through the week, and then we have peak times regarding seasons. So when there is a lull and they don't have as much foot traffic, that's where there's registrations of fleets for businesses. That's all, they don't come in for that. That's all being done as time is available. And so it's all of that work that's happening when you don't see the numbers necessarily in the lobby. But lately, our lobby's been full pretty much from when we open to when we close.
Well, yeah, I appreciate those
Yeah.
perspectives. Like I said, I'm not saying these statements saying I want to do this and I'm proposing this to the council, but
Sure.
I'm gonna keep flipping stones and asking what's underneath it, so.
One thing that we're able to do now, now that it's all services at that front location, is we'll be able to provide really good data on how many people are being served, which days, and what are the hours, because now they're all coming and using the same system. So,
Yeah, Counselor Knowles.
With regards to Recreation Department, this isn't for proposed more reductions. I had a chance to look through, and I just had a question about one of the impacts that you had on here in eliminating the community seniors, rental of the community senior center, Hasty, and the fields.
sure.
And I was wondering if you could just clarify a little more on who's eliminated from that? Because I want to make sure that in an effort to be budgetarily, fiscally responsible, we don't hurt members of our society, of our city that are going to be not able to access something that we've paid for. That, in particular, especially with a big chunk of this budget, we should be at least say it, that we got 1.4, if I'm not mistaken, $1.4 million of our debt service is a result of voter referendum authorizing us to spend that money. So that was for the safety building and for the school. So obviously our voters and the citizens of Auburn believe in our kids and services to the city to a certain extent. So I think we can fairly extrapolate that we don't want to cut services to such an extent that, and the recreation department, I think, is our kids. So who was going to be eliminated by if we were to, and how much money does that cover? I guess that's my question on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Donna cover quite a bit of that. I think the directive that, as I worked through some of these items with Donna, was that one of the feedback was, look, are we covering our costs, right? That was one of the comments that was made. And if we try to cover that cost, regarding rentals right now is probably a good,
Yeah.
we'll start there. We'll talk about some of the other programs.
Yeah.
But, so for rentals, if we try to cover our cost on those, we're outside of market. And so there's really, it would really be difficult to be able to cover our costs.
Yeah.
Because we might have somebody that wants to rent a field, and that means not only is the rec staff going up, but also PW staff is getting that field prepped, whether it's, you know, striping or whatever they've got to do for that. So there's added cost to that. So if we were to work that in, that's where you're not covering your costs. That means you're providing an added taxpayer service to an entity that might be renting that. And so that's what we're talking about there is the rental of that space, not programming. Programming is separate, but I'll let Donna kind of talk
So
about
like
some of
an
those costs.
AAU team would rent the gym, or that's going to be eliminated, that kind of a thing, or a community group that wanted to come in and use the basketball court for a period of time?
Yeah, so the like Phil was mentioning, it's just very layered. So for fields, for example, a big portion of it is due to field maintenance. There's a cost to keep up with the field, not getting enough funding to keep up with keeping the fields enough for our own programming. So we don't really have the time to rent it out anyway. And when the mayor and the assistant city manager went to look at our fees, we don't really charge a lot because we don't rent it out that much. So eliminating that is not really affecting many people. We'll still rent it out during the day. It's a free park. People still use it. They go to the playground. They'll use the field. So that's not really affecting much. As far as the senior center, same idea. It's used for the seniors during the day. Those costs are also low. That will not affect programming for seniors or anyone else. The only thing it may change is we do have baby showers, receptions, things like that in there. I don't know if that will have many complaints, but that would be the effect that if we stop doing rentals there. For the gym, again, the cost to keep the building open and the cost of staff. We will still do rentals during the day, so during operational hours, 8 to 4:30 when staff's there, because we don't have to charge the staff. We're already open, our building's already being maintained. So that we'll do rentals and we'll still charge for them, and it'll just be in extra revenue. So unfortunately, that may only be available for an AAU team during school vacation, but that's the biggest effect.
Right, but it's not going to affect the leagues, like the adult men's leagues and
Nope, it will
other
still,
types of things that
our
are...
regular programming will still be using it. That's our first
Okay.
priority, is still continuing our programming there.
And is there something in these reductions that you think are, I mean, I realize you'd probably say you can give it all back to me, but is there something critical on this list that we're taking away? Or is this reorging kind of a thing?
I'll give her a minute to think about it. So the
I didn't want to put her on the
so
spot, yeah.
While she's thinking that through, this is a complete shift in the way that rec has been operating. So there's a lot that we're going to learn this year regarding because we just brought in all of the special revenue accounts into the budget. So keep that in mind when you're looking at that expense line item. So if you look at the operating expense on that top line item for municipal, the city expense, that has the additional, all the expenses that we had been paying out of the special revenue accounts are now in there. So when you're looking at that percentage, know that that amount has been adjusted because of that. They were always in the special revenue account before, but now we're seeing them here. You do have them in the revenue offset, plus the additional that we estimated for the 35% increase on programming costs. So that's all those impacts, just so you know that that's how that shifted. Now, I think I might have given Donna enough time, but yeah, know that no department wants to see any of the reductions. So, but yeah, I think that.
And I appreciate it, because I thought what you put here together as across the board was thoughtful and good, and I appreciate what that Don is willing to do this, so, you know.
First and foremost, I now understand entering special revenues into the budget. At first, it was confusing to me, but I think the biggest concern I have is for the participants. Just Auburn's population struggles to pay the current registration fees that we have, even though they are low. For example, our summer camp is $900. With the 25% increase next year, it'll be $1,125. So we do have funding through CDBG, $20,000. However, you have to qualify for that. And every year, the medians may change, and typically only certain people qualify. And over the years, different people qualify, and those that used to qualify don't anymore.
And how many participants do you get a year in that, roughly?
So if you compare us
At
to our
900 apiece,
counterpart,
yeah.
we get about 260, and Lewiston's getting about 60 to 80.
So 260 times 300. 260 times 300 is what you're, if we were to create a scholarship fund, the difference, or
Historically, have we had success with private entities participating in scholarship programs to help kids participate?
For youth sports programs, or no, it's not something we've explored yet. The Ingersoll Fund is something we have. We haven't used it yet. We haven't found a format that works where we've had people qualify, or we don't know what that looks like yet. We have a form used for summer camp that we can follow. I just don't know if the medians are appropriate where they could qualify for that. I think that's something that we need to look into. Also, there's only $2,400 in there. So that will, with our current population, that will be depleted pretty early on.
So just, just to be clear, under the CDBG money, that supports low-income participants in the project, in the programming at no cost?
No,
Or at reduced cost, depending upon their...
depending on their household, how many are in their household, and the
Right.
median they qualify, we do 25, 50, and 75% scholarships. And that has changed. If they made $50,000 last year, they may qualify for less than they did the year before. And just to go back to Counselor Milks, I think it's just the fact that the programming is going to be more expensive, so that's going to be the biggest challenge we'll face. And I mean, our adult programming already makes a lot of money, but increasing that by 35%, I know Heath Crocker will have a hard time getting those numbers and getting that funding from those people. So we'll go from $900 a team to $1,200 a team. So it's just getting the participants to pay that is what we'll run into, that issue.
I think the biggest concern, I think Council Milks, as you're referring to, is we don't want to be turning away kids because of these changes, right? And so when we built the budget, I did allocate the funds for the upcoming revenue that'll be coming in for programming, but I also included the expense line item. Currently, there is revenue that's in the special revenue account that it did not apply. That special revenue, I think the rec department does a great job of, they have conversation with people. They're talking about with them and saying, all right, we do payment plans, we do all of those things. Rec staff will be able to use those funds if there's a gap and there's somebody that's making a penny too much, right? And so they're not qualifying, but you know what I'm saying? There's just, they're not quite there, but there's a gap. Staff will be able to make sure we have that revenue account, because this is new. We want to be able to see what happens as a result of this. Did we go too far? Is there did that increase too much? We'll be able to know that. We'll be able to collect the data. One thing the rec does a great job of is collecting a ton of data for us. So we'll use that money and be able to tap into that to make sure we're not turning people away because of this adjustment that we
And
made.
you said it's about 20,000, the CDBG money now?
Yeah, that's typically what we get every year.
So I'd throw out that perhaps that the city, we could allocate instead of cutting by 110, we cut by 90 and allocate 20 more to fund to address
Well,
the kids, or if it's already in there.
You currently have about $100,000 sitting in that account.
I withdraw my suggestion then.
Okay.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, Don.
Counsel Whiting?
Had a comment on the meeting, use of meeting rooms, the senior center. Library has meeting rooms and they're kind of underutilized, so that'd be a good referral that may help them out and lessen the loss of, senior center space.
I think we see a lot of people that will go to the rec because if they try to rent the school, right? If they want to rent one of the gyms in the school, they have to pay the janitor fee, all of that. And so it's expensive, but yet we're providing it, but we're not collecting our cost for it. That's the challenge.
Counsel Geary?
Thank you. Now, will the nonprofit groups still be able to have their meetings, those that have them like once a month? Or are those going to be eliminated?
You mean in the senior center?
Yes.
I think Donna did mention that as long as it's during the day, when regular staff operations, but it might impact the evening operations.
Because I know of a group that I guess their meeting starts at like 6:30 and goes to 8 o'clock.
Yeah, so another funding cut that we've made is in our part-time account. So those individuals are paid out of that. So after hours is when our rental people are paid out of part-time. So we won't be able to have anything after 4:30.
Even if there's other things going on in the complex, like you've got a softball game or something over to Ingersoll or even in the Hasty?
That would be situational, so we can't promise that someone would be directly watching that building.
And then how will that interfere with anything that the city may have if they want to have a public meeting in the evening?
If the city would be there, they would be a city official, so they could open and close the building. So we wouldn't have to pay anyone.
So just to make sure I'm clear on this, the issue about the evening rentals is that if you actually charge the fee to equate to the cost you're incurring to do this, that you wouldn't get the rentals because the fee would be too high. And the reason the people are coming to rec to rent now is other places, including other public facilities, are charging a higher rate. And that's why they're coming to rec.
Exactly.
Okay. Council Walker?
Yeah, could you tell me what your rate is for Hasty Community Center?
During the weekday, 8 to 4:30, it is $20 an hour to use the gym. And then to use the rec room, which now is currently, PAL is in there, but it's $25 an hour. And then, yeah, that's,
And you're saying at that point, you're not making any money?
we would still collect those funds. So we would be still continuing to make that money. We just would not be charging anything because we wouldn't be renting the building out after 4:30.
Because if I can, I see where Council Walker is going here, but the reason that you have that rate during the day is it's shared resources, right?
Yeah.
The rec people that, you're getting the $20 and $25 an hour, but you don't have to pay for a full person because they're doing a bunch of things, and the $25 an hour during the day covers the portion of whatever they're doing to let people in and get them
Yeah.
going.
We're all in the office, so as long as they check in and we know they're in there and we know when they leave, then that's all we need to know.
What I'm looking at is if the Hasty Community Center, if you rented it for $500 and you work the person for, we'll say, 8 hours, what's the cost of him for 8 hours or her?
Well, think about that. So before we get to that, so what we have to constantly monitor with our part-time staff is how many hours are they working? Because the moment that because we were having this, and so we're trying to dial back some of this because we don't have a lot of people that are willing to work those part-time hours. But the moment we cross over and have too many hours, then HR lets us know we now have to shift that individual into full-time benefits, once they get over the 30 hours. So we do monitor some of those things, but I don't know if you have.
Our average employee makes about $16 an hour because the minimum wage is $14.85. 8 hours is about $130, but they would have to take a 15 to 30-minute break with an 8-hour shift. But I would just still round up to $130, but I still don't know what the building operational cost would be. I would have to look into that.
Then add FICA on top of that.
Well, I can understand what the city manager just said about, part-time people and everything, but that wasn't what we were talking there about 5 minutes ago. We didn't hear anything about part-time people or any of that. I can tell you, years ago, when we rented a building for $350, and of course, people didn't get paid $16 an hour unless you were here for 15 years. We paid them $10 an hour to work, and they got overtime because they worked 40 hours a week. So we still made money at the end to put into the revenue at the end. So our revenue grew from, I'm going to say, when we took over the Hasty Community Center back in 1970-something or 80-something, whatever it was, we would take in somewhere around $25,000 in revenue. That would help us with programs to pay for whatever was needed. If we wanted to buy a new scrubber for the floor, we were allowed to take it out of that money there because we never could get it into a budget, especially back in them days with the council that was sitting here. They were tighter than bark on a tree. But in any case, any revenue, in my opinion, is better than saying we're not going to do this. I think we definitely have to keep that option open. The same with the senior center. In the morning, you have people there for an hour and a half on Wednesdays, we'll say. I've been there many times at 7 o'clock. There is nobody in that building when them people are all there sitting at their tables and all discussing their business. They come in every Wednesday that I'm there, and I see that. There is nobody babysitting them. The most that someone might do is turn on the lights for them, and they know how to do that as well, but they open the door, I'm sure, turn on the lights, and I'm not sure what you charge them people. But whatever it is, it's a profit, and to say we're not going to let them people come in the building at 6:30 when it's such a simple thing for them to be there for an hour and a half, and then they leave, and everything is pretty much in the same shape as when they showed up.
I agree. And I think what we asked, what you've done from an assessment is there a true net profit? I think what in terms of adding in administrative fees, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Manager, was that you were trying to get closer to what the true cost was so that we are offsetting additional costs because the rental fees weren't covering the full costs of the building and the staff. And so I think it's just trying to get closer to what is the net loss or net, so that it's break even, where we can then continue to have the programming. The programming is valuable. I just, I'm happy to talk about adding some of these things back in, but my understanding from earlier conversations with the council is that we didn't feel that getting closer and closer to a 10% increase was something was palatable. This is a very hard year, and I can, Donahue and every other team has worked very hard to make some really tough, look at these numbers so the manager can make tough decisions. So if it was a profit, I think that we'd be talking about keeping it. But my understanding is that the rental costs do not meet the true costs, and there isn't a profit, there's a net loss.
Yeah, there's not, so when I talk about market, there's not, so just the recreation, facility rental, and this isn't the senior center facility rental, this is just facility rental. So you're looking at about $9,800 a year is what brings in for revenue for that. So if you were to take the rate that Donna was just talking about for an hourly rate, but then you also take in what we were estimating for facility costs, right? and for utilities, those things, then now you're looking at, somewhere's around, really, you're renting about 5 hours a week. That's what that would equate to if we were to match the cost to what we're charging. 5 hours a week would be that we break even on that, somewhat, because now there's still somebody that's also scheduling and working that through. But they're working where they're getting paid, we can work that into the schedule. So the question is, do you want that time and that effort to continue renting this when we're only talking about 5 hours a week? If yes, we want to provide that service, then we'll work up the cost, we'll charge the higher rate, and we'll see who takes part. So we could easily do that.
Right, so that was gonna be my follow-up. So we're talking about things outside of programming. So these are outside entities that want to use the facility and they want to rent them. Since we have flexibility with part-time staff, is it burdensome to figure out what the rate is and just say, okay, we'll still rent it, but here's what the rate's going to be?
We could do that. What we can do is we'll work this in still under the special revenue account, right? So we won't work this into the
Yeah,
budget.
so it won't affect the.
Won't
right.
affect the budget. We'll work this into special revenue. We'll go through and determine what the cost should be based on that part-time staff that Councilor Walker's referencing. We'll work in that cost, also the facility cost, make that the charge. Revenue will come in, expenses will come out of that line item.
And then we'll see
Then we can see.
if people will
Yep.
rent it for the 5 hours a
Absolutely.
week.
Yep. Good?
Any other thoughts on this item? Okay,
We're still going to avoid fields, just so that we're clear on that.
Yeah.
Fields is just something.
Right.
The other piece with the fields is we want them in good shape when the programs are actually out there using them. And if it's not the ones, if we're not running the program, it's hard to make sure those fields are maintained. Our people who run those programs know, hey, it rained yesterday, they shouldn't be out on it, all those kind of things.
It's a big safety thing too. We want to make sure if there was a youth program, we just want to make sure they're safe too.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other items that councilors would like to discuss? Council Platts, I know we got sidetracked when I think we got 1 or 2 items off your list. Do you have
Yeah,
others?
I can toss up another one. Again, these are just for the purpose of discussion, I guess, but I'd love to get Public Works up in the hot seat and ask just a couple questions about PW.
I didn't hear what department.
PW.
Oh,
Yeah.
They're already coming.
I'd
So,
like,
right.
yeah, I figured some of us had questions, but yeah, I mean, I'll preface it by saying I think, I don't know, I think Public Works probably gets picked on every time there's these budget cuts because we see how large that operating budget is. So really, I'm just here to ask the question of kind of what if we were to propose a number that's an additional cut, what would that do? So just that number to start, it looks like we've already taken $143,000 out of the budget with some recommendations by the city manager of what that might affect, and I understand those. My question is, what if we went further, and what if we asked you for another $50,000 in a cut? I'm curious just to have a discussion about plowing, salt use, dirt use, I know sidewalk clearing, situations where maybe we have sidewalks on 2 sides of the road, maybe we're only clearing one of them, maybe we already do that, I don't know. So I'm curious to ask some of those questions.
So yes, we already do that. We have several roads, we don't plow both sides. And we get a lot of complaints on that already. As far as salt, our salt right now, we base it on 5,000 ton. That's the average that it's been for the last quite a few years since I've been here. And that budget does usually get cut. Just for instance, this winter alone, we are at that number or over. And we were only at 350,000, so we did go over. And that's based on 20 storms a year. We're at number 30 right now. So, I mean, you can base it on a winter that, like last winter, wasn't as bad. You might be okay by cutting that budget. The same with the overtime, and I know the overtime showed a little increase this year, but that overtime got cut last year, so that's just bringing up the average overtime for that 20 storms for the year. So that's where we're at with that right now.
I guess one other question that I had was, I understand, I met with you guys and you educated me on how we tier out plowing priorities, and I think that's awesome. Are we moving different streets into different tiers every year? Are things getting reclassified, or is it set it and forget it? It's been that way for a while. How does that work? Because, one thought, I do understand, I've talked to Dennis about this, like, I live up Perkins Ridge, I'm probably the last tier of priority. And I understand that if you went from, I don't know what it is, 8 hours, 4 hours, if you went to every 12, that's not good. That road is gonna freeze over, you're gonna do more work the next day, right? But my question is, have we ever moved a top tier road down to a second tier, or a second tier to a third tier? And I know there's tons of complaints. Dennis sent us the call log for what you guys go through. So I understand it's a double-edged sword even talking about this, but I just want to learn more.
Yeah, so every year we kind of look at that, complaints from the previous year. We always adjust our plowing maps on what's priority, what's not. Do we need to bump up a priority, or can we let this road go a little bit longer before we get there? So we're constantly changing that from year to year. We do have the set plan in our snow and ice control plan, but we are constantly evaluating that.
And to also add, I know we take a lot of flack on plowing. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but plowing is the number one thing that you can do to get the material off the road, because if you don't, it gets packed down and then you're fighting it. It's diesel fuel, it's sanding it every day. And as it is right now with the amount of mileage that we have, we've split our day up in 3 8-hour shifts. So if we went 12, the problem is that some of those trucks that plow some of those priority 3 and 4 roads are, they also have a salt run. So they get pulled off that run when it's time to salt because the roads have iced over or whatever. So it prolongs even getting there even longer. So that's why some of them roads, it takes at least 8 hours to get through, because that truck is constantly pulled if salt is needed to be put out. We don't have enough trucks to do separate.
Other questions on that item? No? Council Eisen?
Thank you. My concern is personally, I don't see cutting it 225,000. I mean, I heard a lot of from citizens about plowing, as you guys have done, which was the plowing and sidewalks, and a lot just right here downtown, the sidewalks not being plowed for a long period of time. So my concern is having that much of a cut, and even going more is really going to be a detriment to services to our community and the plowing, and for people to get around and increase accidents, which will probably affect fire and police operations. So I definitely can't see cutting 225, so I would probably reduce that, my thought. And it kind of sidesteps a little bit a question of mine, which would be in the communications and engagement reduction.
Well, let's take them separately. So,
well, it just kind of, the only thing is because it says event setup, and I take it that's going to be kind of, and maybe the manager can just help, that's kind of directly tied with each other. So if I affect that one, it's going to affect your guys' budget as well. Is that correct?
If I'm
I'm not taking a reduction in the events, if I don't reduce those events, you are going to see that the public works are going to need to increase. We can't reduce, because one's going to affect the other, is what
It does.
Okay.
So Mr. Manager, do you want to clarify the 225,000? The 225,000 cut wasn't directly changing plowing, right?
Yeah. I think, the team here can address that. I think that what you're seeing for the reduction is, if you recall, last budget, you did allocate 3 additional equipment operators for the striping. So we are reducing that down to 2 in this budget. Taking that individual does impact, and they can speak regarding the impacts, because that means that's one less person that they will, during winter operations, right, to be able to get out on sidewalks earlier, all those kind of things. So they'll talk about some of those impacts. But what it's also impacting is when they are striping or painting, that means they're pulling somebody off the team that could be out doing ditching, culvert repair, all the other things, sweeping, because we do that in the fall as well. So it impacts when they're going to be actually painting. So we have those multiple impacts. The other piece is regarding some of the customer service piece. We have to take what we have for staffing, kind of adjust that. So that's where the other reduction is coming in. So you're taking the total amount. I broke that out. So now when you look at the details on that detail sheet, you actually see it broken out so that it's less than that, because some of that money is now under fringe. Some of that money's here, and then the rest of that money is under facilities and energy, because it was a reduction in the diesel fuel bid that came in less. So right now for their budget, Public Works budget, you're looking at $143,000 for the reduction for their line item is where they're currently at. But they can speak to the other impacts on that.
So it's not the 220?
The same amount, 225,000 reduction is in the budget. It just doesn't all show up on the Public Works line.
If you look at that master sheet that I provided you, it says right there, it's 143,295. The rest were spread out through the other three line items.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So taking that other equipment operator, I know when the striping came forward, it takes 3 people to do that job. And the only problem with it is that some of it has to be done at night. So you're going to put a 3-man team on that has to switch their shift. So if you're down a man, now you got to pull somebody else from the regular crew to go on to that. And it's, obviously we're going to change it up a little bit because a lot of our striping was done at night. We're hoping to do the major arterials at night and then bring it back to the day, because it's going to dry faster during the day when the sun's on it. We have that crash trailer. We're going to use that to help protect our guys when we're out striping. So we are going to experiment with that and try to bring a lot more of that to days. But it does impact pulling, right now we're sweeping. We're 8 positions down right now, and that is with 3 with striping we haven't been able to hire. And we've had some guys get promoted, and we've had some guys leave to other jobs that are paying more money. So right now, we're looking, at our street sweeping, it takes a lot of people, especially with all the handwork. We get through all the sidewalks, and then obviously we take those people and put them on other jobs. But right now, that's what we're up against. And by taking another equipment operator away, that's just taken from our other duties. It's planting, it's weeding, it's mowing, it's parks, it's the whole everything.
We did do some comparisons. I think Councilor Pat Platts had talked about this last budget too. It's really challenging, especially within this department, to compare with other communities, because we have 500 or so road miles, right? So not every community is faced with that. So we've done some comparisons based on per capita, based on road miles. We've looked at some of that. But I think, again, 2 communities, just if I was to pull out a couple communities, South Portland, which has a lot less roads, and if I break out their facility costs, break out their solid waste, break out their water and sewer, they're budgeting, let me start with Augusta. Augusta is, currently operating their public works operations at $7.2 million. We're sitting at $6.3 million. And we're seeing that consistently through some of these other communities. We just haven't. They're not operating with the staff numbers that they should be for the types of work that they're doing. Councilor Walker and I spoke quite at length about this, and a lot of it has to do with a new crew, and so a lot more additional supervision, and even our supervisors are new. And so that becomes a lot more work to make sure that they're out monitoring, making sure where are we at. We're able to collect a lot of that data through the work order system that you saw, right? So if they send a crew out and they know how much time it takes to do that work, right? Council Walker could still tell you today how much time it took to mow a park or something like that. They know that. So as they're working that crew, they know that it's a training curve that they have to kind of work through. But currently, when you do our comparisons with our communities, we're not staffing at the same level that other communities are. And so that has an impact on the level of service. And so we've had this conversation with the amount of parks that we have. Is that the right number? Should we be reducing it? Should we just be creating some open space and not necessarily full amenities at some of the parks? I think that the work that the council has done with Lake Grove over the last couple of years has been phenomenal. That means that we're seeing more people go to that park. That means they can focus that effort, make sure that it's done there, and not doing the other, 14 other parks that we have that we need to monitor. So it's a lot of that work that's taking place, but I just wanted to circle back because you did talk about comparisons last year, and I wanted you to know we are doing that. We're kind of digging in, where are we, and where it's challenging is we can't always compare apples to apples.
And I'll always remember that conversation because when constituents complain about taxes, I remind them that we have more road miles per capita than any city in Maine.
Yeah. Guys, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
I think you covered most of it. Like I said, and not only that, but I mean, granted, we got the people. Is that we're always looking to consolidate whatever. I mean, with facilities now under us, we have electrical under us, and we also are doing the school, helping the school out and doing some of their stuff for the school, custodians and all of that. So we do have a big preview under our umbrella that we take care of.
Council Walker?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. A couple questions. I think the manager probably would request it, but I'd like to know how many things that you have contracted out I guess, in the whole budget, but at least whatever you've contracted for man hours to take care of other things that you don't have to do now, meaning like the cemeteries, for instance. I'd like to know how many, I know how many you have. I'd like to know how many you've contracted out, other mowing areas, if there's any green areas that we're contracting out. And I'll tell you why I'm going there, because somewhere around 11 years ago, 14 years ago, you guys took over the parks crew. And when you took over that crew, you picked up approximately 6 full-time men. I can also tell you in a very short time, all them men were gone, and you had to hire new men and train. And whatever reason is not any of my business why they're all gone in such a short time, because most of them worked for me for 20 years and 15 years. So there was definitely a problem there somewheres. The other thing is, them 6 men, and I've watched your crew work 1,000 times and in 1,000 places. I've never seen 6 parks men out there as a team at any one time. And when you talk about sweeping, for instance, you have all kinds of guys out there sweeping. You probably have the parks guys out there, but that wasn't what the parks guys did. Years ago, when we ran the parks department, we worked like a team with you guys because you had the sweepers, but we had the manpower. What I've seen in the last few years is that manpower has gone to hell. I don't know where it is. I don't know what you've done with all of it, but my parks department back in the years that we did what we were told to do in this city could work circles around what you do. And that's the honest to God truth.
Other thoughts on this item by the council? Is there?
Mr. Mayor, I would just say that, I understand Councilor Walker. Councilor Walker and I talked quite a bit about this, and I understand that. I think that, I want to make sure for our staff to know that, there's a lot of additional duties that have grown over the years, requirements. Councilor Walker and I were talking about new OSHA requirements and some of the other challenges that are on them to make sure they're hitting those things. So, there's a lot of other variables to this, and our team, our supervisors, they know what needs to be done. They're doing their best to be able to address that. Do we hit it every time? We don't. But I understand what Councilor Walker's talking about. They understand that too. Those are things that they work on as well to make sure we've got a team that's operating well. So I just want to make sure that we address that part.
Yeah, thank you. So, do any of the councilors, is there a proposal to change this public works line in any way, increase, decrease? after the discussion?
Well, there
Councilor
was,
Walker.
I think there was a request, or at least he said, what would happen if we cut $50,000? I don't think we got an answer on that. We got an answer on a lot of things that the manager has cut. But what would happen if we cut the 50,000 or asked you to cut 50,000 more?
If the council's looking to reduce 50,000, I would say, let me work with the team.
Right.
We'll come back on Thursday. We'll be back in 2 days. We'll talk about what that looks like. We'd be looking at reduced material, and we're reducing the level of service. So those are, there's just no other room in there for that. So really, it's reduced materials, which means, as they already stated, we're already over on winter materials this year because we're at 30 storms. You know, when we work the budget, they're talking to me about, if you go through and they track how many storms we have every year, over the last 10 years, the types of storms have shifted. Just think about what you've had to do for clearing your driveways, right? You're not seeing those large, just regular snowstorms. They would love to just have a nice, good, 12-inch storm to deal with. That would be great. But they're dealing with mixed precipitation. They're dealing with icing. That's what we're seeing in every single storm that we have out there. That is shifting how they have to respond and what they have available, who they're putting into what trucks. And as Scott was saying, that means they're pulling off their plow guy that's going out to deal with some of the snow that went down to now start dealing with the ice buildup. And so I'll work with them. If that's the number, and you're like, hey, I want to really see 50,000, what that would do, we'll bring back what that would do, what that would look like.
Council Eisner?
Yeah, I don't know what the other sense of the council is. I don't look at cutting $50,000 from their budget. Because like I said, I'm going to get onto another subject, and that will affect this potential changes. So I would look at taking from the 225, and I think I'd add some back in there because I mean these are hits to services that need to be done. So I'm somewhere around 50 or 75,000 of adding back into the budget because I think these are important things that need to get done. Obviously, they're bullet points, but obviously, hear it all the time. The roads are horrible. I can tell you, South Main Street and the other roads. And you go down into New Auburn by the Dunkin' Donuts, huge pothole, probably blow out my tire driving past it. So, I mean, these things are important that constituents are always talking to me about it. So I would add probably 75,000 back into their budget is my kind of thought. So but obviously, before he goes off and goes, cutting or I want to add stuff back in, obviously the thoughts of the council.
So for Thursday night, can you come back with feedback on 2 items? What the increase in services that are proposed to be cut here, if 75,000 were added back in, and if an additional 50,000 are cut, what would be the impact in reduced services? And I think that'll cover the range that the councilors are suggesting.
Absolutely.
Council Platt, I think you have other items on your list?
Yeah, but I mean, I can also, some of them are smaller. I'm happy to bring them up Thursday. Unless, is today the day? Do we want to go through
Well,
everything?
Yeah, I think if you have items,
Okay.
it would be great to get them on the
Yeah,
table.
here's
today.
another one I had, and again, I could be struck down and said this is a terrible idea, but my question was, in facilities and energy, I had a little asterisk here with $15,000 reduction, and I just want to learn a little more. Are we as efficient as we can be with HVAC and lighting? I mean, if this were my house, it'd be 57 degrees in here right now. I understand we can't do that, but are we? Our lights off at night. I know we have smart meters in some buildings, not all. Do we have any movement with utilities, or are we as thin as we can be?
We're excited to see what's going to happen this year. We have a facilities person that's in place that this is what they specialize in. I think that if you're looking to say, well, let's at least reduce 15,000, I think that we're going to see some efficiencies. I think as our individual starts working these systems, we're tying all of them in to making sure that they're programmed, that we're hitting times on them, people aren't in the facilities, heat's being reduced. All those things are he's working through now.
I guess my real ask is the following, and this is a little bit like homeless funding in that whatever we don't budget, you still got to pay for electricity. So I understand that, right? If we go over the budgeted costs for heating, cooling, electric, you still have to pay it. I understand that. But I was thinking the same thing. We've just hired this facilities admin to look into these. And so my question to him would be, these are the budgets you had last year. Do you think that we can come in 5%, 10% less with utilities? If he's wrong, we'll have to cover it in the fund balance or some emergency fund. I understand that. But again, this is more of a budgetary exercise than us actually saving anything. But it's saying, hey, can you estimate what your savings might be? That's going to help us with our tax levy. If you're off $5,000, we'll take it out of the fund balance. But if he's the one putting it together, we're asking him, what are you confident with?
Yeah, we've had 2 months since we started building this. That person has been in place for 2 additional months now. Let me work with the team. We'll sit down with him. We'll come back on Thursday with a recommendation.
So I think the number, this has been very short term, right? So I think to Councilor Platz's point, it's not like we have a year of information and we say we know we can cut X dollars. I think the question is the team projecting savings, and is there a conservative number that we could put in there to reduce this that we're comfortable with, that we think they can hit without driving us into a situation where we end up in an emergency?
The number you're seeing now takes that initial, we're seeing savings into account, because we actually held the line on the budget. And as we all know, electricity went up, natural gas has gone up, all those things are increasing, but we held the line knowing that we are creating those efficiencies. So some of that's been worked in, but we'll drill into it further, and then we'll have that for Thursday.
Do you have others?
That's mostly it. I guess the last one that's worth bringing up, I had another $15K out of LA Transit Authority. Again, I'm not dead set on it. I'd love to hear other counselors' thoughts. My rationale for that was I remember the presentation, and I remember being blown away with it. Ridership is up. But what I couldn't get out of my head is, okay, ridership is up, but every ride is at a loss. So the loss is just growing and growing, and that's fine. It's a service we need to provide, but they're talking about increased frequency of trips. That's great, but that's increasing the loss. So I'm just looking at this number. It's like, how do we stop the loss from increasing every year? Maybe it's just 1 year. We're saying to them, you've got great growth plans, but this isn't the year we can fund that growth. But I'd love to hear what other people have to say.
I think this is the year to see exactly what ridership looks like with the new route system. So the thing that we can't do is because each route hinges on the other route based on headways, all those things. So we're already reducing a lot of routes in this recommendation. We're expanding the on-demand. And so the transit committee just met last week, and that's where the 26,000 came in for a reduction because the state funding increased. And so, but we also know what the first year of the contract looks like. We also know what the second year looks like. Second year is going to be a higher increase because we've been using our reserve money to help keep the costs down. And so, so I wouldn't recommend taking any additional out of the reserve fund because we'll be using that next year to help offset some of the costs. But I think what'll be important for you to do is see what the new routes look like in the ridership. And because this is, Councilor Cowell can talk about this, this is a complete enhancement on technology on each one of these as well. People will be able to pay be able to know when the bus is arriving, right on their phones. If there's showed consistency, removing the 2-hour headways to 1 hour, I think that you're going to see ridership change. And to your point, Council Plus, you're always going to be, you're always going to be running at a loss on federal transit, on our local transit, but with our federal dollars. So know that we really do cover a very small portion of the overall system cost, though.
Yeah, I think
That's all helpful to hear. I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, I think it's important to note there that what's before us for transit is an increase, but it's much less of an increase going into a new contract than it would have been if we had maintained the same legacy system. So they've removed a bunch of low ridership routes. They've put more frequency into high ridership routes, and then the on-demand is tied to those routes, because to use the federal money, I can't remember what it is, a mile or 3 miles or something, there's a required area based off where your fixed routes are that you have to offer the on-demand. So I think that there's a lot of unknowns here, and I agree with the manager. Let's see what happens this year.
I respectfully withdraw my original comment, but I'm glad we were able to talk through that. That was helpful.
Yeah, and I think you're also gonna see, because of the reduction in the amount of routes, that means that's less wear and tear on the buses. And so now we extended the life expectancy of some of our buses. We allocate $50,000 into the capital every year in preparation of purchasing the bus, our portion, which again is very small compared to what the true cost of that bus is. However, I think that's where we're also gonna be seeing some savings.
Did you have other items, Council Platt?
Now, I had a couple 5,000s here and there, but it's not worth the time right now.
Sure, thank you. Other councilors have items? Councilor Cowan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question for about police. I wanted to better understand the impacts related to the transferring the animal control position from sworn to non-sworn, and you know, what are some of the costs there, but what are some of the losses in efficiencies, things like that? Just trying to understand the benefits and deficits.
Sure, Counselor. The cost benefit to that would be the lower wage that would be paying that civilian employee versus a sworn employee, and given the sworn training that person would not have to go through with the Criminal Justice Academy and whatnot, plus all of the fringe benefits that are allowed for that sworn employee as part of their collective bargaining agreement. Some of the pitfalls to that is some of our animal control investigations, some of our animal cruelty investigations are very complex investigations that require search warrants, that require criminal investigations, criminal charges. That's something that civilian ACO can't do. So now that ACO is going to have to lean on either a patrol officer from the patrol division that's already maxed out, or a detective, or somebody from the PACE unit to assist with those investigations. So that's taking away from their caseloads, and that creates some inefficiencies for us.
And so, in your assessment, the inefficiencies, the added costs of having a sworn officer having to step in and do those things, does that offset what we might save, or is it still a cost savings for this transfer?
When you look at dollars and cents, it's a cost savings. However, when you look at the inefficiencies, I think those inefficiencies outweigh that cost savings, because when you take a sworn officer off of the roll, so to say, you're losing a valuable resource. That sworn officer also does traffic enforcement when they're not going to and from animal investigations and whatnot. You have that extra badge and gun out on the streets. And anytime that you take away from that, that creates operational deficiencies.
You know, it's, you know, over the 30 years, right, that I've been in that department, the chief's been right alongside me for most of it. It's sometimes it's who you have in place and who can do that function. So, you know, we used to have a civilian. There was, you know, we had across the state, there was challenges with hiring a civilian ACO. We pivoted, we used a sworn position. We could be putting this in the budget right now, and we could not have anyone available, no one applying, no one qualified. All those things could potentially happen. It's a struggle with other towns right now to finding ACOs. Small towns tend to kind of cobble together somebody to make sure they got some coverage, all those things. So we can put it in here, we can try to do that. And then the other thing is, you know, this person could, that's in there now, could retire in a couple of years, and we might be back saying, all right, now we don't have any sworn people that want to do that function, and now we're back to civilian again. So it's about who you have and how you can leverage them. But as the chief said, does it create some efficiencies? Yes. Does it create some cost saving? Absolutely.
And the manager's right, as I was polling other agencies as far as doing a salary survey for this type of civilian position, there are agencies out there that are actually going to the sworn position and offering a stipend because they can't find qualified applicants for it.
Gotcha. Thank you. Complex.
Council Milt?
And question regarding that, is there someone, are we laying somebody off?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, that sworn officer that's in that position would then backfill one of our current vacancies.
Thank you.
Other questions on this item? Are there other items councilors would like to discuss? Council Wiseman?
Thank you. It kind of goes back to community engagement and the reduction of 38,000. I see the bullet points taking away the proposed change one, which was moving the LA Blues and Brews Festival over to when the Balloon Festival happens. But the other ones that are here I think these are very important for the community, and cutting, it's $38,000. These, and you'll have reduction of possibly the Lobster Fest and some advertising. I mean, there's huge economic impact to the community downtown and the city of Auburn by having these events, and losing some of these events are important. I mean, there's a cause and effect with everything. But I think personally, I think these $38,000 investing it, I know that's a reduction of what totals there, but I think it's well worth having that money there to have those events. I imagine that department will be able to tell us kind of more of those economic impacts to that, but I don't see reducing it 38,000. And I know there's, like I said, a correlation between Public Works as well, because they've got to staff these events throughout.
Councilors have questions or comments on that item? Council Platt? Go ahead, Council.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, so there must be, you would like to add, I think there was one event that was canceled, right? Was the Lobster Fest.
That is correct, and eliminating the holiday hangout as well as in the proposal.
So what would be the total cost to adding those two back in? Because it's not just the 38, there's also Public Works. That's your question?
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Leroy says fire and police too, so there's multiple different factors.
Yeah, I
I was
think.
waiting for you to come up.
I think also, to follow up on the economic development point, we've had a number of internal discussions about this. I think there's very little evidence to show that these events are driving economic development. Most all of the people that attend these are all from the local area. And typically, I think the one that has more of an impact is New Year's, because you get more hotel stays out of that, and that's not proposed to be eliminated. But I think, look, I don't think anyone disputes it's a great free event for people in the community, but the question here really is this the priority in this year? And if we're going to say we want to keep this because it's driving economic development, I think we need to have a conversation about that.
I think he said activity, not we're not going to drive people in necessarily buying houses, but you're driving money into the local businesses, I think is what you said.
Yeah, I didn't say development, I meant impact.
Yeah.
Because people are coming, they're visiting, they're all downtown.
Or they're
So
going out, yeah.
They're going out. They're eating food. It's an impact to the community, and I mean we're supporting local. I don't know if the Exchange Club is a nonprofit. It probably is, but I mean there's a driver there that they're fundraising and they're supporting PAL. They're supporting things within our community, and it's a thing that this is a service that people enjoy. They enjoy the Blues and Brews. They enjoy the Lobster Fest, even though it was it's created as a joke. It's become one of those community things that people look forward to. Yes, it is one of the things we have to discuss. As a counselor, people in the community I represent they like these types of things and
Sure.
want to see that. So I don't think a 38 reduction, which will also lead to Public Works, as I said before, kind of, they tie into each other, so.
Right, and as Council Walker said, police and fire, and look, I don't think anybody disputes that people like them. The question is, can you afford that in this budget climate? So, Mr. Manager, or Ms.
I'll
Allen?
make you feel a little better about police and fire and PW. We budget that into what we put into the event budget. So it's not going to impact their bottom line, which is
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
So if we added it back in, it would be 38 back into the budget. That'd be the total budget impact, or would there be additional money that the Public Works would need to?
Yeah, no, you wouldn't be adding, as Liz just said, you're not adding anything to any of the other budgets. It's already in, it's baked in to that amount for that event. And so, but yeah, it's, what do you have an appetite for? You know, I think that you could easily go to Grady's or Craft Brew Underground and say, hey, what's the impact on these events when we have them? I bet it's huge. And because a lot of people go to that. Those are two businesses,
It's Lost
right?
Valley, it's the
So
food
there's a-
trucks, it's because they all come as well, so.
Sure.
And they fuel up their cars when they're here, and they fill the hotel while they're here, more than one hotel, I'm sure.
And people want to have something valuable in their city as well, so
And we're building such a great reputation as a destination. People want to come here. They know we put on extraordinary events. And remember, we have that Placer AI software that tells us exactly where people are coming from when they come to our events, where they go when they leave our events, so we can track, you know, the benefit to local businesses and that kind of thing, and really see what our demographic is and who's attending.
So your holiday hangout, not a huge dollar amount. I think it's $3,500. So it's not a big dollar amount for that. Is it great for those vendors that are there? Absolutely. Just keep in mind, you have some other priorities that you're also looking at. But I get what Councilor Weisner's saying. He's saying, hey, people that I talk to, they want to see these programs. And so, you know, just keep that in mind. So it's a really small amount, but it's a big opportunity for all of those individuals, because I don't know how many vendors we have.
We usually average about 6 or 7 breweries and 5 to 6 food trucks. We put someone in the concession stand as well to maximize that space.
So that,
I think our last one was 25 to 30 small business vendors at that holiday show.
so that current line, it shows 38,000 on here, but from the prior discussion, the total in that department reduction's $111,000. So can you clarify the differential from the 111,000? If we're adding back in the holiday hangout and the third event, is that total $38,000 that we're adding back in? It's higher than that, right?
No, I think, you know, if we keep the Blues and Brews on the Balloon Festival shift, right? So that's gonna keep that reduction down. You're going to add back in, if you add back in Lobster Festival, that's at 10,000. You add back in Hilton Hangout, I'm sorry, it was 2,000. The other reductions that you're referring to, Mayor, is that if you look at the overall, we did not fill a third position that's in that office. And so
Correct.
that position, we wouldn't be bringing that position back in. And so that remains out.
To make the adjustment here, if we're doing those two things, if we're adding the third event back in and we're adding the holiday hangouts back in, what's the net effect?
I would say, yeah, I mean, the expense is 12. They potentially could add a little bit more into sponsorships by maybe, you know, 5,000 probably back into sponsorships. So, you know, you're sitting at about $7,000 in expenses
So,
to add those two back in.
so we're reducing on a departmental basis, the $111,000 reduction will go down to 99,000. That's the 12,000. And in the revenue line, we'll add 5,000 back in.
That's right.
And that'll cover the complete cost of
Those two events.
that event. And what about the coordination of that? Because in the prior discussion, because of the elimination of this, staff in that department was picking up coordination of events from rec.
Yeah,
How's that gonna work?
they've already taken, I think Fright Fest is one that they picked up. You know, we'll have to look at it, because it's what other events are we still offering? I think those rec opportunity events are really important. Council gave a directive a year ago to say we want to see more family activities in the downtown specifically. So that's why Fright Fest was brought into that. That really tapped into Liz's team to make that happen and work with that. I think we'd balance that out between the two groups, between the two departments.
So, yeah, it still is right now, yeah.
Still happening, yes, but it was some of the other, you know, we do the Easter egg hunt. That probably we won't bring that downtown.
Movies in
That'll
the
stay.
park, there was
But
a
movies
bunch
in the
of,
park, all those things.
There was some transfer and
They're trying to take some of the
responsibility.
coordination out of rec and over to communication.
So, is there a sense from the council that what you want to do is to restore the holiday hangouts and the third event? Is there anyone opposed to that?
I mean, if it's only $7,000 and that's what they're looking at to add those events back in, I mean, that's,
Right, we
If
think
it-
it's
if it's-
around
Yeah,
that
if
now.
that-
yeah, if it's around there, then
It's
I'm fine
15
with, I mean,
grand,
that's
I'd
an
be in
easy.
favor of it, because I agree with Counselor Wisner. I think quality of life is important, and if we can have low budgetary numbers, not that 15,000 isn't important, but it is. But in this, it's gonna be less than that. Because I think the citizens of Auburn are looking for a higher quality of life in Auburn. That's why they voted, and I'm looking at the increase in our budget, 39%, if I'm not mistaken. The increase in the budget this year is voter implemented for the school and for the
You mean on the
total
debt
increase
service
in-
line?
on the total increase. 39% is based on the school of the total dollar increase.
I think you might be including the debt service in there as well.
That is
So if
the
you
debt
take out
service.
But our regular debt service, if you take that out, I think it might be a little less.
Okay, but it's the voters have said that they want higher quality of life in Auburn, and I think this addresses that, and people do like those events.
I think it's worth looking at, but to equate, I don't know that I could fully agree with that statement that if they're voting for additions to the school and they're voting for a public safety building that is in dire need of being replaced, that it equates that the same voters would say, yeah, I love going to the Lobster Fest. You were talking last year, 2,100 people, that was the rain. 4,000 before that. I'd love to know how many of those truly were from Auburn versus the region, right? I think it's a valuable thing, but we're, again, talking about where we had to put in added value into our debt service to carry projects that hadn't been carried forward. It hadn't been done earlier because there was a big increase in support for a school. Support for school does not, in my mind, equal exactly the same thing as quality of life from an event. I agree that people do like that and that's important, but I think we have to be careful to say that everyone that voted for the school and the public safety building also wants to go to a Lobster Fest.
I'm not just referring just to that, I'm referring to the strategic plan that we did prior to that COVID insanity. And that was over 100 citizens, and there's 11 things, if you read through that, quality of life in our city, to give it a broad thing, was very important. And that's where some of these ideas came from. So I agree, we've gone through a horrible inflationary time in the last 4 years, but that we still have to maintain, and I think we're doing some of the things. So I just want to make sure that it's not just this, but it's a reflection on us the citizens willing to address that. And I think we are being very fiscally prudent in this budget.
Thank you. I appreciate the extra context.
Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended the Lobster Festival. I was collecting candidate petition signatures. I know, in fact, that 1 out of every 4 people I talked with were not from I mean, the 1 in 4 was the only one from Auburn. The others were others that had come down to listen to the music and to enjoy the Lobster Festival. I've had some residents, like at the Rope Block, and even Barker, that went down there. They could not afford the food that was down there. They barely were able to pay for the soft drinks. They're teetotalers. They didn't want the hard stuff. The only way to get the quality of life and to bring more of Auburn residents to the downtown is to expand the Lobster Festival, to take in our school groups and other nonprofits and let them set up booths that they can sell some of their stuff, or even themselves make a chili, chowder, whatever contest. That way, you're able to get some still good quality food at more of an economical price. These school groups, baseball groups, whatever groups that want to fundraise, that's another added source of revenue, or even the PAL Center, that they can use to supplement the funding. And we've had to turn down sort of that swim team. They could possibly apply to go to this Lobster Festival. I'd love to see that whole circle around our parking lot down here full of vendors. And possibly, if we had to, force most of the parking that usually go in that parking lot into the parking garage, because the parking garage is not totally utilized when we have these events.
I think that, Liz has done a great job of balancing some of that out, right? To reach out, to bring Exchange Club in, right? I think they provide the lobster bake. They're raising the funds. Councilor Cowan asked for some more details on that. They were able to provide the PAL Center funding so that money does go to one of those organizations, right? It's the challenge is finding the organizations that are willing to put it on, but also how does it balance with the theme and the event that's taking place for that event and what people are looking for when they come. They're very selective on the food trucks to make sure it's a lobster fest. We want to make sure that that's what they're coming for. But for those for those food trucks, if you bring another vendor in to do something that's easy to sell, like water or something else, it's very challenging. It's not at the scale as a balloon festival. I think the age-friendly group are able to raise some money when they're there all weekend at the balloon festival selling water, I think, and soda maybe, or just water, sodas. So we really try to balance that out, because those food trucks, that's where they're making their profit as well. And so when we bring them in, other communities, if they're doing an event, sometimes they're paying a food truck to come to provide it. We're not doing that. We're actually, because we're allowing them to make the funds at the event. And so it's balancing all that. I think, I understand exactly what Councilor Gary's saying. I think that when Liz talks with them, she works with them on their menu to make sure that they are providing some options that are affordable, that are not just crazy prices. So that way we're trying to meet everybody who might be coming. There's an option that might be there. I think Liz did a great job on one of them recently to bring in, a pizza truck, right? So that the cost for that might be a little less than what some of these others are at. And so that's that balance on all the events, not just Lobster Fest.
So just so we're all on the same page here for this item and we can move along, it seems like not all the counselors are in agreement with this, but the majority are. So I've made an adjustment based on those numbers. You can verify them for Thursday, but at a departmental line for business and community,
Communications.
Communications, I'm reducing that by 12,000 and putting 5,000 in we're actually, what we're doing is under special events, we had a $20,000 reduction in revenue. We're changing that now to a $15,000 reduction in revenue because we're expecting to increase 5. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so other items that the councilors have?
Mr. Mayor, can I just make a quick comment for Liz? And I know Councilor Walker and Councilor Gary have said it before in our previous budget meeting, looking for more friendly, family-friendly events. And also, I never got a report, but a report on parades and parade costs for probably a future budget for next year, especially with having like a veterans event for Veterans Day. I bet Councilor Walker had brought that up when not having a veterans, and as well as a kind of a Christmas type event as well. So in a parade there. So
We had a Christmas parade with the tree lighting this year, and my understanding is we're continuing that.
That will continue.
This coming
Yep,
year.
that's in the budget, and
Right.
there's also a parade for the Boone Festival. It's in the budget. It's being done in Lewiston, but we'll obviously be assisting on our end. That's not very long. That goes kind of through just down New Auburn, across the bridge, and then it goes to Samard Paint Park.
okay, yeah, I just remember that Leroy had brought it up in respects to the parades, and Councilor Gary had talked about the family-friendly events. So for the future, thank you.
Other items that councils want to bring up this evening? Okay, so with the changes we've talked about, there's some follow-up items that the manager is going to bring back to us, reminding folks, we'll be hearing from the school department on Thursday relative to what the impacts are at a $500,000 reduction level. We'll be hearing from the assessor about budgetary number that we can use for valuation increase. There's a few items we talked about tonight, the manager, but the ones where we've made changes, so where we're at now on the municipal side is a 2.9% budget increase with a total tax levy increase of 5.59%. And of course, there'll be some follow-up items for Thursday, and we'll estimate what the changes. Some of them are positive and some of them are negative. We'll estimate the changes Thursday night.
So those items are not in, 5.59% doesn't include what happens if we reduce, the what-ifs.
Yeah,
This
the
number
what
does
ifs-
not include the what-ifs,
the-
correct?
The things that there was some consensus on the council to include, right, we've made those adjustments. But as an example, the ask of Public Works about what would it look like if it's a $50,000 cut or a $75,000 increase, that's not in there yet. Any other last comments from the council? Or Mr. Manager, any final comments for this evening?
No, so Thursday we'll have all that, and we'll be ready to continue discussion.
Great, thanks very much. The workshop will be adjourned. We'll see everybody here 5:30 on Thursday evening.